You're good.
All right, I'm going to call this instruction work group meeting to order, dated January 9th, 2023. We have one public speaker today, and that is Ray. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Let me wish everyone a sincere Happy New Year, although just between us, I can't wait for the year to be over. That was supposed to be a joke. Sorry. Anyway. We have to laugh in the face of death. Anyway, I'm back because I just want to engage once again. I took a bit of a gap on the special ed plan. I feel like it needs to be integrated with general ed. And to do that, the way to do it, in our opinion, and this not just me, sorry, I've been working now over the last year with lots of people, professionals, parents, a lot of people who were across the country too, where it's emerging that if we focus on our children, on our kids, and our students with the most complex needs, and complex needs is a key expression, which would include every child that has a need different from the norm, which would include Black kids, kids with disabilities, IEPs, LGBTQ+, including, and we must pay attention to this, the difference in the way advanced learners learn, then all will rise. It's perfectly logical to accept that when one focuses on the hardest problem, everything else rises. And that's what I want to say in the context of the special education plan being presented. I think we have said this quite a lot. So to see that was a bit of a shock and a disappointment to a few of us who've been exchanging emails and stuff like that. So anyway, that's what I got to say. And that's about it. Thank you.
One more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Our next one is Martha Savaro.
It's pronounced Saravo, but thank you very much. That's okay. I'm here on behalf of Mantua Mamas and Disability Advocates because we are able to have a perspective on the proposed draft of the special education plan. I've been in contact with a lot of parents, a lot of different group members for different reasons in regards to that specific document. So when looking it over, we're suggesting that you take a look at what kind of staff suggestions are currently in there or what's missing, like what's changed. That's a big issue right now as it is. And if we're going to look to changing something about the system that's including all students with more complex needs and we want to do a better job, so we need to consider the staff we have on hand. I did know that there's some data that we can start getting from there when it comes to seclusion and restraints that DPI currently doesn't capture when it comes to looking at racial identification of the students who have IEPs that are currently involved in those types of incidents within our schools. And I know for a fact that the people who put that together have not been in connection with all of the local groups who we consider stakeholders when it comes down to this whole draft in the first place. Mantua Mamas has not been connected at all. We've invited them to connect with all of the people that we have and the parents I know that we be thoroughly interested in it. And the SEAC, they have not been involved with them at all either at this point. So when it comes to stakeholders and current ones at that, there is still yet work to do. And I don't believe that this initial draft truly captures all of the needs of the students as of yet. So I would just look at this with a fine lens, and I hope that there is a much more comprehensive version of this that comes up that has these stakeholders involved with that aligns with their vision for their kids, our students, and the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to our speakers. Next motion, the minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated December 5, 2022.
Second.
Second, board member Vandermill, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. And on to item 4.1, a health services update. Nurse Carrie.
Good evening, everyone. So in regards to our respiratory infections that we've been seeing prior to winter break, we were experiencing a very high level of multiple different types of respiratory infections. We actually think we were probably seeing more influenza than we were seeing anything else. Since we've come back to break, now granted, we only have a couple of days worth of data, but the trends in the state are we're definitely seeing a decrease in the amount of cases of influenza and RSV. The COVID seems to be relatively stable, but again, we're going to monitor that closely because we always know after break time, we usually expect to see an increase in the number of COVID cases that we have a couple of weeks after we gather. So we'll be watching that closely over the next couple of weeks. And then the other thing that kind of has started sprouting up again is strep throat. So we're seeing lots of kids with sore throats that are needing to go in and get a swab. And that is different than all the other respiratory infections because that's caused by a bacterial bacteria. And so you need to get antibiotics to get rid of strep throat. So over winter break, we kept almost all of our ACL testing sites were open. A big thank you to our building services teams for helping us keep those buildings open over winter break. So we were able to offer COVID testing over winter break. Right before break our winter break started, we held a very successful vaccine clinic at Lakeview Elementary School, where we administered over 204 vaccines at that clinic. We unfortunately had to cancel the one that was scheduled at Leopold. That was the day school was canceled due to bad weather. And so for right now, we don't have any more vaccine clinics scheduled at this point in time, but we are looking to have some vaccine clinics in April through a partnership with SSM Health and Public Health Madison-Dane County to really look at helping to get our 5th graders ready for 6th grade because they have a very important immunization that is due for 6th grade, the Tdap vaccine. And so we're going to strongly encourage that vaccine at those clinics. And I believe we're planning 4 clinics at this time in the spring. And that is it for my update. Thank you.
All right, thank you, board member Vandermill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My quick question is, are we worried about the new strain of the COVID vaccine? Is there anything we need to do different?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, that's why we're monitoring. This is going to happen. There's going to be variants of this COVID vaccine. We've had it kind of all along. It is concerning just because of the type of variant that it is. But I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but the vast majority of our community has either had COVID or is vaccinated for COVID, or maybe even both. And so it really doesn't pose a super great risk, I think, to our community, but we're definitely going to be watching it closely. And like I said, we are expecting to see an increase in about 2 weeks' time. We always see that after our breaks. And so we're going to kind of just watch our numbers closely. But the nice thing about it this time is hopefully our influenza numbers are going down. So we won't have all of these respiratory infections happening kind of at the same time like we did before break.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? All right, moving on to item 5, summer programming. And for this presentation, we have Cindy Green, Nicole Schaefer, Janet Dyer, Mary Yankovic, and Ms. Kaylee Jackson. So can we presentation?
How many pause points?
There'll be.
Thank you so much, Board Member Castro. I am going to call my team up and I'm going to kick us off, and then I will have our team walk us through. So I'm going to call Kaylee Jackson, Nicole, Mary, Janet, if you all want to come up here.
Sorry.
Betsy, do I need to take myself off mute? I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. So while everyone is getting settled at the table, Jesse, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just a reminder to everybody that is watching, as well as everyone here, our vision as a district of every school will be a school that prepares every one of our students to the college career community ready. I think both of our presentations tonight will do a good job of continuing to show how we are trying to realize this vision. Next slide, please. Similarly, for our core values, we believe that what we're going to present in terms of our initial thinking around our summer programming, how we are intentionally uplifting these core values. I hope you will also see tonight how some of our new thinking around summer programming is going to also help to realize all of our goals with a specific focus on our goal. So tonight, I just will walk us through real quick the outcomes. We are going to share a little bit of the data of what we learned from summer of 22 and how we used that to inform the changes that we are presenting tonight for summer programming. I want to mention that we are sharing initial thinking. We're still in design phases of really thinking about what's going to be most impactful to provide to our scholars this summer, but we're excited to share with you some of our initial thinking. In addition to that, we are going to have an update on what we're thinking about in terms of how to develop our newly revised special education plan. I think it's important to note that the plan is not written yet, but Nancy will walk us through some of the thinking about how we're going to gather in order to develop a new plan for special education. And then lastly, we will hear from some of the members of the Justice and Humane Committee as to where they are with their recommendations to the board. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Schaefer, who is the director of our summer programming, and she's going to get us started.
Great, thank you, Cindy, and good evening, and board members, and thank you so much for the time to present to our initial summer programming. We're excited to share some of the information, and I think you'll find our presentation that will be really student-centered, really robust and focused around learning experiences for our students with strong collaboration from a variety of departments as well as various partners. So we will begin by briefly reflecting on the summer of 2022. We did serve approximately 3,300 students in grades 4K through 12th grade and focused on high quality instruction to really accelerate growth in key skills so that they could finish summer semester better for the upcoming school year. We provided students with well-rounded opportunities both in social and emotional learning as well as the arts. We provided students with the opportunity for credit to stay on track for graduation and double down on supporting those critical transitions 4K through 5th to 5th or 5K and then 5th to 6th as well as 8th to 9th. Here are a couple highlights from the summer. You see on this slide is the attendance outcomes. So our outcome for the summer is to have 90% attendance. Our average rate of attendance this past summer was about 74%. Next slide. Credit recovery. This slide is going to show you that about 90% or higher really were the rates of success for our credit recovery across all of the subject areas. And we also learned that virtual learning is really a desirable venue for most high school students who enrolled and completed their coursework for the simple fact that it really allowed for flexibility to take more courses and then complete them at their own pace. We will provide additional data and analysis from 2022 that will be in the Board of Ed report and in the weekly update for you all this week. All right, slide 9. Following each summer, we engage in after action reviews with all of our departments. And this year, in addition to that, we did some deeper reflection of our summer programming by working with research and evaluation, who facilitated innovative sessions with a cross-functional design team to understand the summer experience, to really define the problems, ideate solutions, and then build some prototypes, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next few slides or up and coming. All right, and so what we found in our design team is that childcare really is a critical consideration in the summer. That we had roughly 77% of our families mentioned it as a factor in their decision to enroll. And then also a large number of staff reported that families who didn't receive full day did withdraw their children from summer semester due to childcare concerns. The other finding that we had was school year attendance is directly correlated to summer semester attendance. So those, for an example, if you have low attendance during the school year, that is a very similar result in the summer. And then conversely, if you have high attendance during the school year, you have high attendance in the summer. For those who did attend, the family summer survey did show that families were overwhelmingly positive in terms of what was offered during the summer. Next slide. We also know that summer semester is an equity strategy, yet there were inconsistent opportunities. So summer semester really is more likely to serve students of color as well as students and low income students. And we do know that the Summer Arts Academy in particular with the 5th through 12th grade opportunities, that were the enrollment was largely white students in that academy, and while our target populations of Black and Latinx students had lower enrollment. And the last another finding, and the last one that we are mentioning here, is really staff concerns exist from our surveys and focus groups. Many staff mentioned that they do not feel the rate of pay for summer semester is enough, and that nearly 700 students were unenrolled from summer semester because there wasn't enough staffing to support enrollment. All right, slide 12. Thank you. So now we'll talk a little bit about the overarching program for 2023, as Cindy had mentioned, and really highlighting that programming exists from June all the way through August. And these will be the 5 buckets or primary areas that we'll talk about. So I'll talk a little bit about summer semester and some of our prototyping. We'll highlight secondary options, MSCR, and the arts. Next slide. Thanks. So based on our findings from the redesign teamwork, we did outline both long and short-term goals and plans for moving forward. Here are just some of our short-term focus areas for this summer. So we are looking at updating the mission and vision of summer semester, looking at adjusting the criteria for summer semester to reflect some of the attendance findings that we discovered, and then integrating MSCR and the arts into summer semester. And really the purpose of that is to guarantee a full day programming for our summer semester participants, looking at providing equitable access to the Arts Academy, as well as investigating pay rates and schedules to appeal to skilled MMSD teachers. Right, and next slide, thank you. So here are some of those ideas that we are prototyping for 2023. We are excited to be exploring ways to incorporate college and career connections in our elementary and middle school programming with a curriculum that connects interests and some of their texts to a career, a skill, and or a guest speaker. We're working with staff at Shabazz High School who are interested in launching an ecology experiential learning program. We're partnering with the Boys and Girls Club to offer middle school trades camps, and we plan to provide pre-ACT prep for rising 9th grade students. All right, at this time, I'm going to introduce or pass it to Mary Jankovic, the Executive Director of Pathways and Secondary Programs, to share more information with you about specific summer secondary options.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to lift up the secondary summer programming slide and talk about the offerings. So as Ms. Green had indicated before, we really feel like we're getting at college career and community readiness skills. I'd just like to highlight what Nicole Schaefer had said too about pre-ACT prep. That's very new to us for this summer, increasing our apprenticeships. And then on the internship and work-based learning, we're really excited again about some of our internships and apprenticeships as we continue to further our work with Findorf, UW Health. We're even looking into expanding and working within MMSD within IT. So we've got some really exciting things coming about, and we're just really excited. At this time, I would like to introduce Janet Dyer and talking about MSCR.
Good evening, everyone. Just a quick overview on the left column of this slide just shows what we're doing with our community-based programs. As always, we'll have a full range of programs for youth with the capacity to serve over 15,000 kids at 50 different locations throughout the city. Some of the programming that we're doing in the community includes general and special interest camps, arts and enrichment classes, outdoor recreation and environmental education, sports, fitness, and aquatics. So kind of the traditional menu of MSCR programs with some kind of new activities thrown in each of those. I always like to make sure that everyone remembers that we also serve adults in our community programs. And this summer, we have the capacity to serve over 7,500 adult participants at 25 different locations. We're definitely excited that we'll be doing programming for both adults and youth at our new MSCR Central and MSCR West locations this summer. And for all of our participants who may need support in programs because of a disability or other reasons, we intend to provide that through our inclusion services. And summer is a really busy time with us in this area and where we serve, hundreds of adults and kids with additional staff support, equipment, accessible space and transportation, a wide variety of things. On the school-based side of things, we'll be doing our afternoon recreation programming at all of the elementary and middle school summer semester sites. At the elementary school, we run summer recreation and enrichment centers and or SHREC, as we call it. And we have YRCs or youth resource centers in the middle schools. Those programs in the afternoon are set up different for elementary and middle school kids. Elementary students have a schedule with a wide range of activities that they participate in with some free choice in there, of course. Whereas our middle school students have opportunities to choose different activities on a daily basis, but also choose activities that they can kind of focus on and do a deep dive into throughout the summer. And so we're hoping that that will include arts programming in collaboration with Kaylee's team at both the elementary and middle school summer site. Also wanted to highlight our ongoing driver's education program. We'll have a new cohort of 60 students participating in classroom instruction. 120 students. In addition to that, we're a little behind due to a lack of drivers. And so we'll be catching up throughout this winter and in the month of June to make sure that our cohort from last summer gets there behind the wheel and it done for the summer, this summer. And the other thing I wanted to highlight for our school-based programming is our MSCR Leaders in Training program. We have each year 50 to 60 high school students that put in an application and are selected to participate in this program. They go through a training program throughout the summer on different things they'll need to know. Many of them, this will be their first jobs. in addition to helping them with their employment paperwork and so forth throughout that 7 weeks. And those students that finish that 7-week training program will be hired to work in our elementary SHREC programs at summer semester sites. Thank you.
All right, so I'm excited to share with you where we are with our summer arts opportunities. We have learned a lot from this past summer where we had summer arts, and so we're excited to continue with our planning. So in our design phase right now, we have identified 5 different opportunities in order to really build on our summer arts programming. A couple here that I want to, some of these have already been spoken on, so the Arts Explore, Janet just spoke to that a little bit. One of the ones that we're really excited about is that third bullet, which is an open enrollment arts classes for middle school students that would be held both at school sites and at community centers. Having them at community centers is a new addition this year, and we're really hoping to be able to get more students involved, particularly our Black and Brown students. So we're really excited to be able to partner with some of our community centers. We're also working to have high school arts courses offered at our middle school buildings for high school credits. And so that is, again, a new addition this year that we're excited about. And we're hoping to have those courses identified by mid-February. We're also looking at this as an opportunity to bring new and different courses into our summer arts programming, which could eventually be a part of the regular school year calendar as well. Next slide, please, Jessie. And so what we've been doing is ever since Summer Arts Academy ended last year, we have continued to reach out to see what sort of experiences we could bring to our Madison students. And so what you're seeing here is a list of some of those different experiences that we really want to bring into the Summer Arts Academy to continue to diversify and have culturally relevant arts programming experiences for our students. Cindy Green.
Ms. Jackson, could you go to the next slide, Jessie? Before I dive into this slide, I just want to name a few other things that we are working on for the summer. One, we're really thinking about our village builders that are in quite a few of our schools right now and the impact that they have had on our students so far. Nicole started with a slide that showed attendance, and we know our attendance rates in the summer are not necessarily where we want them to be. And so we're thinking about how we can have our village builders at each one of our summer locations to really support that student and family connection. We're excited about that. And then another thing that I just want to lift up that we're working on for this summer is really thinking about social emotional supports and mental health supports for students while they are at summer school. We know that that is still a need that we focus on during the school year and want to think about that both from a curriculum standpoint from the summer as well as from a student services standpoint in terms of the supports. What you have heard tonight is just a glimpse into some of the things that we are thinking about for this summer as we are trying to do some innovation and some design thinking on opportunities for students that are different. Much of that cannot come to full fruition until we actually have staff that will be able to support all of that programming. So that's where this slide comes in. We right now, as you know, have a rate for our teachers that teach in summer school at $25 an hour. That is what our handbook indicates. We also know that last summer we made a change and that rate was at $28 an hour. And we were able to serve a subset of our students, but not all of our students. We are putting forth a recommendation of a consideration for a $40 an hour rate for our teachers for our summer programming. We understand that this will require a change to our handbook, which we know is something that we will be putting forth, but we're also trying to see how we can have that rate of pay within our summer school budget to not go over our summer school budget, but then also understand what our capacity is or our limit in terms of the number of students we can serve to stay within the budget, but also have a pay rate that is closer to what teachers might have during the school year as their contract rates. Can you go to the next slide, please? So with that, I will pause to turn it back over to Board Member Castro, and we can have a discussion about the ideas that we are putting forth, as well as the conversation that I just ended. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jenkins first.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Hey, if we can go back to that rate for the summer, the staffing, please. Let me say this, first of all, before we even get into the discussion, we all understand that we're coming out of the pandemic. We know that an expanded learning time for our students is critical. We know that if we do not take advantages of the lessons that we've had from the past, we will wind back up in those same spaces. Okay, and we do know from experience, we're offering lower rates to our staff. They find other places that they can have employment during the summer to meet their needs, even though they want to be with children. And this recommendation, we know that it's above what we did last year, but it's an investment. Think about the number of students that we did not serve last year because we came out the gate a little late. Some teachers had already signed up for other jobs because the 25 to cut the in-book rate just wasn't sufficient. And then an increase of $3. And you think about the cost of gas, inflation, everything going down. And we want to get our school year off next year up to a great start by investing right now in our staff, putting it out there so we can go ahead and fully staff before we leave out of here. So the commitment we make to parents, you sign up, we have the ability to take care of it. Last year, we had to make some very unfortunate decisions. You do not want to be in that situation where we have parents and even talking about halftime because we just didn't step forward. So I just want to make sure I put that out there. From my perspective, this could be one of our best investments with the dollars that we have for summer school. Thank you.
Board member questions? Board member Pearson?
Yeah.
Board member Nichols?
I just have a question about that last slide. It says the summer school budget is $3,500,000. Is that including the request for the increase for teacher pay?
Correct. What you see here in terms of the recommendation, that is within the current budget that we allocate for summer school, so within the $3.5 million.
So 3.5 million includes your recommendation of the 3.4.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If we went with, just to clarify a little more, we're saying if we can serve 4,000 students, which is kind of what we're saying as the potential cap, and at a rate of pay of $40 an hour for our teachers, that would cost us $3.4 million. So it's within our budget, no need for a budget cap.
We just wanted to make a decision, an equity decision, not to be strategic budgetary realignment with things that we know that we need to do the most. So we're looking at other areas, but the things that are really equity, if you look at the demographics of who attends summer school, why they attend summer school, and want to make those connections that could lead into the fall. Again, it's not just about summer school. We're trying to still catch up. We're trying to accelerate.
Thank you.
Board member Nichols, followed by board member Senator Mullen.
Okay, I'm just gonna say this. I have a little broken blood vessel in my eye, so if it's awkward to look at me, just know that that's why, okay? So going to your comments, Dr. Jenkins, about this being not just summer school, but wanting to capture and enroll as many students as possible because we're still trying to catch students up and provide as many opportunities. I do have a serious question about enrollment. Because last summer, we served around 3,400 students, and I see 4,000 as the base. And I am curious, how do we think we are going to get 600 to 700 more students to enroll in summer school? And at what grade levels do you think that might be most likely? That's the first question I have.
So I can start with that and then I'll turn it over to Nicole. So I just want to remind us all that we had to unenroll 700 students last year. So we had more than 4,000 students last year that would have been able to participate. So the need is there in terms of when we think about our criteria. So I think that we believe that we would be able to serve at least 4,000 students. I think sometimes we have to make decisions about how to determine who gets served and who doesn't based on capacity. But I'll let Nicole see if she wants to add anything else to that in terms of that.
Yeah, so I would just say that we certainly we had higher enrollment than we could staff last year. So yeah, I'm very confident that across the 4K through 12th grade, 4,000 will be an easy mark. We could probably serve more. But I think to do it really well and with quality, I think 4,000 is probably that targeted spot, a sweet spot.
One last thing I would add, Board Member Nichols, before you go to your second question, is the other thing I just want to go back to the design that we're doing full day programming versus half day programming was something that we heard from our families that they actually wanted because the half day programming was sometimes negatively impactful for their schedule. And so we're changing it so that students attend all day, especially for families that may need half-day childcare or something else. So we are creating a summer programming that will be able to run full day to accommodate our families.
And we had to work all the way up into the last moment to make that final decision because of not having enough staffing too. So that was a real theme for us. And we know once staff is on board, it's easier for us to begin planning. And coming out like this, it's just an investment for our staff. We can get them early and then we can make it open to the family. And I still may have to cut because it's just gonna be more than our anticipation of the 4,000.
Sure. Thank you. Just as a follow-up. So last year when I look at the numbers, I think you all shared probably late July, early August. There were approximately 1,650 4K through 4th grade students, 430 5th through 8th grade students, and then about 1,300 9th through 12th grade. Nicole, can you clarify, would we anticipate that we would see more middle school students, or would it be almost like a spread across all grade bands if we were to get back to our kind of maximum enrollment?
We would probably see roughly around 1,500 elementary, 500 middle, and close to 2,000 high school for 9 through 12.
Okay.
That kind of gets it to that 4,000.
Okay. And so is the full day component that you're designing for, is that like a K-8 strategy?
4K through 8.
4K through 8. Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, and then just a couple related questions for the budget. So last year in March, Board Member Simkin and I weren't on the board yet, but thankfully we have board docs. There was a motion to approve $3.7 million for summer school. This year, you're saying that we're going to get back to full enrollment and add some new offerings and increase hourly rate for staff potentially, but we're coming in with a lower budget amount. So can you talk about where you've taken some reductions, or what have you shifted to go from 3.7 down to potentially 3.5, and yet everything else is driving up? I mean, maybe you found some efficiencies. I'm just curious if you know, and if you don't know, we can have a conversation. I mean, you can supply it at another time.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, so given the number of students that we needed to unenroll last summer, as well as we were not staffed at what we thought was really full capacity. We did not entirely use all of that budget.
Okay. So the budget to actuals wouldn't be that we actually spent 3.7.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Also, so a few things that aren't showing up on here are central office staff salaries that are part of that 3.7. So we're not asking for a reduction in the summer school budget, just to be clear. The budget is 3.75 million, I believe, between the two. Remember, it's split over 2 fiscal years. That is still right now what that budget is. Some salaries that we just house for the year, i.e. Nicole Schaefer's salary and a few other things are what makes that up. Also, I want to point out that one of the things that Board Member Nichols, you might have mentioned, and I just want to clarify, is the Summer Arts Academy is above and beyond this budget. That is an ESSER project that we put forth for last summer and would like to put forth the remaining funds that we did not spend last summer to do it again this summer. But the other items that we've talked about are part of the prototyping that we would work within the summer school budget.
Okay. So which leads me into kind of the next, it was budget enrollment related question for the Summer Arts Academy. So last year, there was a target of $1.3 million from ESSER funds, specifically for the Summer Arts Academy. And then when we got an update, we had learned that in its kind of pilot launch year, 228 students had taken advantage of the Summer Arts Academy. So sounds like there was some money that probably wasn't used last year, right? You've got some money to kind of carry over. Are the enrollment numbers that you're showing in the 4,000 including the Summer Arts Academy, or there would be a I don't want to say a different group of students, but there would be a different enrollment number of students served through the Summer Arts Academy?
So yes and no. Some of the students, if you remember, as Kaylee and Janet kind of talked about, a portion of how we're redesigning summer school will have a piece of that Summer Arts Academy for students that are attending full day.
Right.
In addition to that, we're doing the open enrollment option. We're doing the buying seats at the community center, and a few other things that would be above and beyond the 4,000. I'll turn it to Kaylee to add to that.
Yeah, that's about right. So, so it would be 4,000 and then some, right? Because those and then some may not necessarily be enrolled in summer semester.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The last thing I'll ask, thank you, Chair, for your patience with me, is you talked about going through a design process, which is really exciting. You also talked about seeing kind of some over-representation of the students who do attend summer school. And we also know, as I remember, last year for the Summer Academy, that wasn't so true, right? So how has your design process helped you get closer to the experiences of students of color and what they need to take advantage of summer school and or the Summer Arts Academy?
So, yeah, thanks. I'll start and then I'll pass to Kaylee. So one of the ways in which we'll take a look at incorporating or really getting the students, the targeted group of students that we would like to see is much like we did in elementary last summer. So we integrated the arts programming into summer semester, and that was really well received. It matched the students who were in summer semester. So we are looking to do that in that full day programming for our middle school. So that will get at that group of students as well. And then beyond that, I think I'll pass it to Kaylee to kind of talk a little bit about how we're going to go about looking at the community seats as well as the open enrollment piece.
Yeah, so with our open enrollment and our were seats in the community centers, right? We are specifically reaching out to community centers where there is a high involvement of our Black and Brown students. What we have learned in communication with our community centers is that they very much desire to have this sort of programming, but don't always have the connections or the resources or what have you. But they're serving our students, they're serving our MMSD students. So we are going to work with them to put those arts experiences right there in that community center in order to get more of our Black and Brown students engaged. I think, again, when we think about the work that was done with R&I in this design, another part of the battle for parents, right, was the fact that it was not an all-day program, right? So which was obviously a transportation sort of an issue. And we are expanding that, of course, through summer programming to be full day to take away that barrier of transportation.
The one last thing I would add, I'll just add one thing to that. Oh, you want to go first?
Real quick,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, so in the design process, thank you for that. In the design process, usually you are talking to people who will benefit from the design. It sounds like you have insights from families, which is great. I think part of my question was like, have you actually talked to students of color at the high school level, at the middle school level? How have their voices helped shape, or how will their voices help shape kind of final iterations in the design process? I think that's more what I was going after. And if that hasn't been done yet, I guess I would question the design process.
So we did have student focus groups, in particular at Black Hawk Middle School, where there was summer programming. And so we did get some student input. Although I think the thing that we all need to think about, at least for myself, is that this is not just a 1 year, but we're looking at this over time. And we know that we're not going to be able to just completely overhaul it in 1 year, that we're committed to really looking at this summer by summer and getting additional feedback as we go.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nicole, and I'm just gonna push that. I mean, I guess especially because I work at National Equity Project and we do a lot of work around human-centered design, liberatory design, and that engagement piece where you're actually talking to people about their experiences should be a driver in your design process, not input or feedback on the back end. So I'm not saying you have to go out and do like an entire campaign of 3,000 young people, but some of what you all are prototyping, you actually want it to like be attractive to the students you're prototyping for, right?
So
Okay,
that
anyway.
is part of the next steps and phases. Hannah showed us is Lauren Morse from the research and innovation team, who is helping support with the innovation portion of their work. So yes, that was prepped as the next steps as we get into the content portion of the project. So again, looking at it, as Nicole mentioned, in the different phases of first trying to think about how we can get staffing in that space, the spaces, the locations, and all of the programming portion from that vantage point, MSCR and Arts Academy integrated, and then taking the next steps to think about how we can improve the programming itself based on student needs.
Okay, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Just want to add one last piece that we did learn specifically from students and families. And I think this gets into the conversation we started with around our recommendation for understanding the staff pay, is our communications to students and families about some of our programming, specifically the summer arts, needed improvement. One, because of our timing in terms of when we started, as well as who actually got the information. And so that is something else that we are really thinking about moving forward in terms of just the opportunities that are available and how people are finding out and how people are able to sign up is something that we definitely are working on. And once we have our, kind of final plans, will be an improvement area.
So just to clarify, are you saying March is actually late?
March,
Because it looks like the board voted last year on kind of our early vote. And that was March, at the March board meeting. Are you recommending that it actually move up a month or?
or 2 months, so we are.
Okay, you talked about the $40 recommendation.
Just any of it to kind of, get the enrollment, the recruitment, the promotion.
Excuse me, we are recommending that we move the $40 vote up because we have to really get after it and trying to get staffing to be there.
So
And other districts are gonna be recruiting our staff to do their summer schools too.
Okay, thank
I
you.
just want to add to Michelle's question, want to move it up to, where did you say January?
End of January, not next week.
Like January board meeting,
Yes.
so January 30th board meeting, we would be voting, that'd be the first item we'd vote on the budget, which should be pretty ahead of, I think.
Because it's not just a budget change, I just want to make sure we clarify this, it's a handbook change as well.
All right, Board Member Vandermillen, followed by Board Member Gomes Schmidt.
Yes, one, I like parts of the plan. I think that we need to work better on attracting. Absolutely. Two, I agree on the $40 an hour. What I don't agree on is when the vote is and why. I need to know budgetary wise, how many teachers we might have to lay off to balance our budget. I need to see the workbook staffing to be able to make these decisions. I would love $40 an hour. I'm not going to lock myself into that and then and then have to lay off teachers. I don't want to have to use ESSER funds that we were going to use for the Summer Arts Academy to be able to balance our budget and be able to afford our teachers. And I feel if we do it too soon, we will lock ourselves in and prevent our teachers from being able to. Do I want $40 an hour? Yes. Will I support $40 an hour? Yes. Can I do it this fast? No, not without seeing where we need to cut. And that's all I have.
All right, Board Member Gomes Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my first questions are following up with the timeline and the process issue here. So we haven't talked in an operations work group about the preliminary budget yet, and we're going to do that on the 23rd of January. Is this coming to the operations work group on the 23rd as part of the budget presentation? Is that the timeline here?
No, you remember when we talked to you, we said February, we were coming with that. We were trying to get ahead of summer school right now in the recruitment. We're gonna give in our update to you in the budget, not at meeting, sending it to you as board members in our weekly in terms of what we were looking to do, anticipating that.
Okay, I don't quite understand that because we are having our initial budget discussion on January 23rd. But what you're telling us is that this is just not going to be part of it.
Yeah, that wasn't the plan to be part of it.
Okay.
I can talk to Ross and see who we are and we can get back with you on that. That wasn't the initial plan.
Okay. And I understand wanting to get ahead of this. I think part of the challenge for me, I guess like board member Vandermillen explained, is that it feels like coming into this budget cycle for this next year, we're going to be trying to balance a lot of different competing priorities, and committing to something first, then you're committed to that, right? And you can't change that as you go. So I guess I am concerned about what comes next. So if there's any way we can put this sort of in context when we discuss on the 23rd, to sort of have some context in how it fits in, I think would be helpful. I guess my questions are going back to the budget slide that I'm looking at for summer 2022. There was a $28 hour amount and a $35 an hour amount, and then it went up to $40 for the recommendation. Can you explain what the 35 amount is?
use.
Absolutely. So the 35 was just another range to show something between what we paid last year and where we are in the recommendations. We gathered data from all of the surrounding Dane County districts as well to see what they were paying. And so we wanted to be able to kind of just show a few different scenarios of what summer pay would look like if we went above the 28, but not to our 40 recommendation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate that. Is there any way you can share that data with us as far as where the surrounding districts are lying and where this puts us in the competitive range? Knowing that, we do want to have the most qualified staff and the most interested and talented staff coming to work for us during the summer. So I get that piece and I completely understand wanting to support for launching into the next school year. I'm just trying to be mindful of the whole next school year that we are facing, with the budget ahead of us.
Let me say this. First of all, I appreciate you just laid that out in context, right? We're knowing that we're gonna have to make some serious decisions in terms of our investments. Biggest investment, we think about what we do with our students and then what we're gonna do about our staff. You can't do one without the other. Clearly, we saw when you didn't have the students, even staff layoff, you would have to do them if we overhire and don't have the students. We also know if we don't have staff, then you can't get the students. This is a multi-complex situation. And when you talk about $1.4 billion, $1.4 million within a budget that we had previously. And when I say we have to start with equity first in budgeting, this is one of those examples. We can wait till we do everything else and then say, oh, now we're going to do the equity thing. It's going to be problematic if we want to fully staff. And we'll come back in context, just like as you said, give it to you in context so you can see it. Our reality is this: if you don't have the staff, if we don't have the positive summer experience, we're going to have some residuals in the fall. And in context and throughout the budgetary process, I'm going to give you the commentary, show those different things as we were talking about. It's not just strategically realigning something just to do it, get to a number. We got to talk about the impact. Everything we do, what are our priorities? So I appreciate that, Board Member Gomez-Smith, but you're bringing that up like that. And I'm going to say to you again, it'll still be my recommendation to do it on the 30th. We'll come back with a different context, in context for you on the 23rd, like that. And I'll work with Ross and our team to be able to do that. But this is a very important first decision that we're going to make.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Because I think having more information will help us too as we deliberate that. Another quick, and these will seem a little bit connected, but notes I was taking along the way. Do we have a new arts director? I know that our arts director from last summer, who was in charge of the Summer Arts Academy, is not with us anymore. Do we have someone new who's sort of spearheading this effort and doing the planning for the summer?
We do not yet. It's been posted, we are interviewing, and we are hopeful.
Okay, sounds good. And my other question was, how much funding, given that we had for the Summer Arts Academy, 1.3 million set aside, we didn't serve as many students and we didn't spend as much. How much do we have set aside that is above and beyond that 3.5 million budget?
So I'm going to provide a little clarity here. We had 1.3 allocated for Summer Arts Academy. I believe we spent a little under 500,000. I think it was 4 something we spent. That money doesn't automatically carry over to this summer's Summer Arts Academy. If you remember, ESSER projects were put forth for 1 year, so those were approved for FY23. Once we hear from all of you in terms of what you're thinking, we would have to write a Summer Arts Academy proposal again to redistribute what we didn't use last summer for this upcoming summer. Does that make sense, Board Member Schmidt?
Yeah, no, it does. And I guess my question would be is, are you aiming, knowing the number of students you were able to serve last year, are you aiming for that number of students? Are you thinking it's going to be bigger based on integrating that into the full day opportunities? Or
we're anticipating that it would be a larger number, both in terms of who we're serving based on who we saw. We served last year, the number and the demographics, and how we're redesigning. So we're hoping for more students for the upcoming summer.
Okay. So, go ahead, Dr. Jenkins.
No, please. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, okay, so you're not saying larger than the 1.3 million, you're saying larger than the 400,000 that was the actual.
We were working within the containment of what was left from the 1.3 last summer, and that was kind of how we are building out our programming. Again, we'd have to rewrite that project, but that's what we were thinking of.
So you'd be aiming for 900,000 then?
Yep.
Okay.
And just in context for everyone too, you talk about context, we're moving out of a pandemic. Okay, we're gonna see things become more robust as we go. Last summer, put that in context for how people are responding still to things. Even right now in the school year, we're already beginning to see some acceleration and participation. So it's gonna be different, and we will realize those dollars that we put to the side that we didn't last year. If you look at the attendance, we're talking about the village builders coming in, making personal contacts with families on all of the programs, not just summer school, everything we're talking about, the arts. We had a big vision about the arts, but this year it is our hope and expectation that we realize this and try to get as many children involved as possible.
And I want to say that I'm excited about the community center option that you're building out, because I think that'll be a fabulous connection for neighborhoods and those community centers that bring youth together in the summer. So I do appreciate that planning aspect. My last question is on the pre-ACT prep course for rising ninth graders. I appreciate that we are not looking at doing actual ACT prep with rising ninth graders, because again, we talked about how that isn't necessarily appropriate for them to be doing that prep that early. I'd also encourage you to look at the rising 10th graders, because they don't necessarily, it depends on what your pre-ACT prep looks like. So I guess I'd be interested in finding out more information as you build that out, what types of skills and activities and things those students would be doing. Oops.
Would you clarify for me early in terms of the ACT prep?
Well, I'd say there's a point at which you want to be doing, like you said, like you're calling it pre-ACT prep, where you're looking at those academic skills and you're looking at doing, enhanced reading and math and things like that, but not necessarily having those students take the ACT tests as a practice over and over and over, because they're still so far out from actually taking the ACT when they're 11th graders.
And I just say we have to have a mixed approach. Thanks for clarifying where we're coming from, because there are some students, honestly, that's in 4th and 5th grade taking the ACT, scoring a 20 on it already, 21. But not all. That's trying to look at all of our students. And so we won't say that we'll do that for all students, but there are still certain students that are ready in our district right now, early on, to start engaging in the actual ACT. But I don't want to do the academic sabotaging of students if they're not ready.
Yeah.
There are students socially, emotionally not ready. So we will gauge that. But
Yeah. So I just want to say I appreciate the range of options that are available for students to engage in that academically.
Thanks.
Right. That's all my questions. Thanks.
All right, board member Muldrow, followed by board member Simpkins.
So I want to thank you all for this presentation. I was excited when you all initially launched the Summer Arts Academy, although I had some reservations about whether or not this was kind of a superficial approach to the arts, and whether or not it would be expansive opportunities. And I was really excited by the feedback we got from families who experienced the arts opportunities that we provided. But I was also not just excited to see that we're continuing to do this work, but so offering our school arts programs to our middle school students for absolutely. And what I was hoping to see in that was a goal for our middle schoolers in terms of what percentage of our middle school students will have high school credit, either taking Spanish or a series of other opportunities by the time they enter high school. So that idea of summer school is not just getting kids caught up, but really accelerated learning, right? I think there's a lot more of that embedded into this year's approach than last year's approach, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I want to go back to the beginning of the presentation where you talked about the goal around attendance. I'm meeting with a group of folks who represent kind of a disability rights caucus, and attendance standards have been brought to my attention over and over again as an ableist standard, right? If you have a child who is chronically ill or experiencing kind of intense healthcare crises, being able to attend, 100% of the time is not possible for every kid. I also want to go back to Dr. Jenkins' remarks around the fact that we are still in a pandemic, exiting a pandemic, and really talk through what was the thinking around a goal that was specific to attendance versus achieving skills or kind of, a more academically measurable goal. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And thank you for saying it. Sorry to interrupt, but I would like to thank you for saying it for someone who has gotten in trouble for every mandatory attendance class because I could never make them.
And I think, I'll go ahead and speak to first if you want to add, but I just think even the way you articulated was correct. We have students during the pandemic, parents have told me they have not been sick one time, that are medically fragile during the pandemic because of the isolation and things of this nature. And then even when we start bringing everyone back in, there's a socio-emotional component we have to think about. Some people are not ready to go back 5 days to school for whatever reason that they may have. And so the same things that have caused us to have these disparities in terms of traditional, we need to be very conscious of that, even when we're reporting it back out. So when you ask it for context, that's what we need to be talking about. What are the reasons someone may miss? But if they're still learning, we said what we wanted them to do. The big thing was, when you're talking about arts, you want people to find a passion, have fun, get in there, get all these different skills, and they shouldn't even notice that they're in a strong, or some people want to say, academic environment to the point. Shouldn't be that kind of pressure. So we have to think about that going into it this time. You heard us mention about the village builders. We're talking about just the whole design. And I want to thank you too publicly, Ms. Schaefer, too, for your work this time in terms of going from what we've traditionally done to looking at now the whole experience. So that's where we're coming from. Yes, we want the skill sets to increase, but we want this summer to be enjoyable. And we want to take that right into the fall, saying we're creating learning spaces. This is why we do the instructional tours that we're doing now as a team to see if it's a safe learning space for everyone. So that's kind of what we're doing. So when you see that we out at all these buildings, we're not just going out to say hi. We're good if they think we can come. We're really trying to understand feeling for right now, summer, and in the future. And if you want to add to that.
Yes, and I just want to speak really specifically to the goal around attendance, how we got to that goal, and if there's academic goals that maybe you all have, but were not part of the presentation, and how they meet that, I guess.
Yes, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Happy to do that. Yes, there are academic goals as well. So we had a 90% goal around recovery, for example, for high school. And then we had a more general goal around reading and math to see growth of skills for kids K through. And that is all captured in the board report.
Okay.
So there's far more data in there as well, but one of our theories you'll see in that board report is really looking at attendance. So when kids aren't there, and that may reflect in maybe the lack of success in terms of how we're growing or not growing in terms of the data that we found this summer. That could be essentially one of the theories, because we did see a little bit flatter growth in terms of the kids actually progress this summer. It's a little less.
I want to make sure that we understand too. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have targets, because I believe you have to have them, but you have to understand it. Children without data, right? They're not going anywhere. The data without the children isn't good data. So we have to have a mixed approach to trying to understand it. There are some traditional metrics that are simply an indicator of other things going on.
The only thing that I would add that Dr. Jenkins didn't say, or Nicole, is that while we do have a goal set for attendance, there is also flexibility within that. And I think what we can learn about during the school year, the use of Google Classroom for students who are not able to attend can access their materials virtually or at home. Secondarily, mostly at the high school level, in terms of credit recovery. When students are doing credit recovery, when they're done, right? Like a lot of our credit recovery is a competency-based model. So a student is able to have more flexibility in that, and they don't have to be tied to 6 weeks if they have completed their courses in advance. Capital High, the way we run our summer school in Capital High is like that. Also, students have certain benchmarks that they have to meet in the summer and when they're done. So I think that there's the opportunity to make sure that whether a student is there or not, most importantly, is we want them to gain the knowledge and skill. And I would say from a federal standpoint, whether it's during the school year, mostly we're also held to a certain attendance rate. And so we use the attendance rate that we are held to for the rest of the school year, which is where we got the 90% from. So I just wanted to shoot.
I just think it's so important to say that, and I'm really glad that you got us to that space in the conversation in terms of the federal expectation around funding and attendance. I also think it's important to acknowledge what makes it challenging for young people. And also I greatly appreciate you speaking to online option as an appealing option, particularly to our high school students. And thank you so much for speaking to kind of where we can identify more of the academic side. I want to ask specifically around the arts middle school opportunity. So one, I want to ask about theater programming being offered to our middle school students, because all 4 of our comprehensive high schools offer theater programming. And that's an area where our elementary school students and our middle school students don't have much opportunity to explore. Can you flesh out a little bit about how the things like ceramics and things that are just offered, kind of exclusively offered at our high schools, are now kind of broadening to our middle schools? And is that middle school credit available for all middle school students? Is it 7th and 8th graders? What does that look like?
I'll answer that last part, and then I'll turn it to Kaylee to talk about the offerings. I think I will just say that until we are able to secure staff, because in order to offer high school credit, I want to make sure we understand this. Until we are able to secure staff that are certified in the arts areas, I cannot put a number on how many students and which locations will do it. We want to figure out an equitable way, and we want to serve as many students as possible. But a reminder, in order to earn and get high school credit, you have to have a high school certified teacher in whatever domain you're offering. So I just wanted to put that out there, and Kaylee can talk a little bit about what we're thinking about, again, all initial phases.
Yes. And so that the one slide up there had some of the bullets around what we're thinking about, right? So yes, of course, we can offer theater courses in middle school. Can we offer ceramics courses in middle school? Yes, absolutely. A lot of it, as Cindy said, right, with the credit piece is tied to our staffing. But as as we did last year, we are continuing to bring back some of the artists and people that we worked with last year, as well as expanding and bringing more people in as well. We have not, the reason the slide says experiences to include, and it's not specific, vendors or specific organizations yet, is because we still obviously have to go through the budget approval process, and then all of that work with these folks needs to go through contracting. So we're not ready to say for sure, yes, this person, these experiences, right? Because it isn't signed, sealed, and delivered just yet. But those are the exact experiences that we are already making connections around and, hoping to get that in.
I greatly appreciate that, and I appreciate the reality of what it looks like to staff something like this and make it accessible to all middle schoolers versus 7th and 8th graders versus 8th graders, and the thoughtfulness that'll go into determining our capacity to do that. I'm really excited by the opportunity to work it out, and I know that this is the first time we're trying that. And so, there's the long-term vision, and then there's what you can do in year one. And that being said, I fully support what we would do in year one, and I hope you let the board know what you need from us to do that. And that being said, I fully support the 60% increase in summer school pay rate. And I can support that pretty easily because I've seen the impact of us doing that in the past. This isn't the first time we did it when we got the original ESSER dollars, and it was highly effective. We did it in 2017. Before the pandemic, when we recognized that there was a staffing shortage around summer school specifically, and we let folks know early on. It was part of the campaign conversation because it was something that had come up in January of 2017. So I think it's a strategic way to invest ESSER funding. I do think that we need to have a really large conversation about how this fits into our overall equity strategy, the overall reality of our budget. But I do think there wasn't a lack of interest in summer school last year. I think there's more and more interest. And I think more and more people, as we return from the pandemic, are saying, my kid needs extra support. They need extra time in the classroom. And this is a way to provide that. And so I'm excited that you all are bringing this to us this early. And I'm excited to see that part of what you're doing to champion this is an investment in our staff. I think if there's anything we want to come out of the gate and say, our priority is going to be compensating people well with this budget. I think this makes that statement very clearly and initially. So thank you for doing that. That's it for me.
Thank you, Board Member Timken, and then Board Member Millen, did you still have your hand
No,
up?
I forgot to turn it down, didn't I?
No, all good. I just saw you pick your hand up once, but
And then it was answered, so no problem.
sounds good. All right, Board Member Simkin.
So I am very excited about summer school as an equity strategy, and I want to look at potential barriers and what we're doing around those. So first around teacher pay. I'm really unfamiliar with this, so I'm going to ask some foundational questions. Do we pay planning time?
It's part of their, currently in the handbook, it's 5 hours a day for 25 hours a week. And so part of that time is kid contact time, and there's probably about 45 minutes that is not contact time. So that would be considered planning time, but it's not a lot. And most of the reason why is because most of what they have in terms of the academic piece is curriculum that is done for them and handed to them. And it's outlined by day, by week. So there's adjustments that need to be made, but not like full on planning.
Is there any expectation that teachers or that give students one-on-one access to them outside of the summer school hours? So
No.
okay, certainly. And do teachers generally feel like that's an adequate amount of time of the classroom to be prepared, or do you get feedback that they're working outside of those paid hours?
That's not really been feedback. We do a pretty extensive professional development the week previous to summer. So we try to do a lot of training and provide planning time to get them started. And so once they are launched, they're pretty much set to go and ready to go. So that hasn't been strong feedback.
Okay, so the key is really that dollarly amount. Great. I'm wondering for our youngest summer school children, we're talking about doing full days of summer school. What's the start time and what's the stop time for them?
So 4Ks are our youngest group. That the start time is 8 and they conclude at 4. And they are the only group, I believe, and Janet can confirm, but they do have a nap time designated in the afternoon, right?
Rest time, yes.
Rest time, thank you.
And then for kindergarten through 3rd grade, same hours? Okay, so I know that I've heard from my work that before school time and that after school time can still be challenging, even with a full day. And so are we looking at MSCR to provide any wraparound at any of our sites, or is that something you're looking at the private sector to be doing?
So I'll jump in and then you can add if you want, but they do provide. So what we do is we pair. So we do the morning program from 8 to noon is largely staffed by MMSD teachers, summer semester teachers, and then that noon to 4 o'clock time is really that partnership with MSCR.
I think you're asking before 8 and after.
I'm actually asking you, so if a parent's working an 8-hour day.
Yeah, we have not done anything outside of that 8 to 4 time, or to my knowledge.
We have not at the summer semester sites. Of course, we do have camps that go, you know, that start from 7:30 to 5:30. But I think on both ends of summer semester and the MSCR afternoon program, there is transportation for students. And so that does take some of that, added some additional time for families. So but we do not extend the day beyond what we do for the 4 hours in the afternoon.
Have we ever received feedback that is an access issue, or is this the first time you've done that 8-hour?
It's not the first time. It's just what's different this year. We've always had the afternoon program for MSCR. What's different this time is every student that enrolls in summer semester is automatically enrolled in the MSCR program, as opposed to having 2 different enrollments. Because we ran into problems with MSCR not having enough staff to provide afternoon programming for all of the students that wanted summer semester. And so, so there's always been that full day option, but now it's more of this is the program, it's a full day program for everyone.
Okay, so last year then, trying to remember, so what happened last year was MSCR was low on staff, and so some of those sites couldn't do the afternoon, is that correct?
Everybody was low.
Everybody was low.
Was low on staff, but what happened in the MSCR program is in the afternoon. We initially worked with Nicole and said, listen, we're anticipating that we're going to be able to hire enough staff to serve 100 kids in the afternoon. And so once those 100 afternoon slots were filled, students could still enroll in morning summer school. They just wouldn't have the afternoon option for us. And so that, of course, is a dilemma for families. And so again, Nicole and I work together to determine how many kids we can serve, you know, in the afternoon, and how many teachers are needed to serve those kids in the morning. So I think there's, you know, more coordination and enrollment.
Okay, so I know that the after school and childcare workforce right now is really, really struggling to find. Do you anticipate at this time that you would have enough staff to do this proposal?
Yeah, I think definitely. I'm not gonna say definitely, but I'm thinking based on staff that we have working now and after school, and the number of staff we anticipate coming back, and you all last year gave a $3 an hour raise to MSCR staff, and so I think that's definitely beneficial. So I don't think that we, you know, are over anticipating our staffing.
Great. My next question is around the attendance that you shared. I'm wondering, I haven't heard you say a lot around specifically asking families or connecting with families around low attendance rates. Is that something that you do as part of the process? So if a child's only coming half of the time, is somebody connecting with that family? Okay, so what were the reasons you were the low attendance rates for this last year?
Well, I think, you know, they were all over the board, really. Oftentimes, I think I had mentioned before that some families did not have full day. So then they withdrew from the morning program. So that was a big factor. I think other times life just happens in the summer and it gets busy, or they had a trip planned and they thought they were going to be able to keep coming back and they didn't. And I mean, there's just all kinds of reasons. Lots of kids. I mean, enrollment occurred last spring in March, like right before spring break and then a little bit into April. And sometimes families will say, yep, I'm in, I'm all about it. And then things change, plans change. And so oftentimes when schools will reach out, they'll say, no, sorry, our plans have changed. We're doing something different. So it was really the gamut and really kind of depended upon the grade level as well.
Were there any issues that came up in those conversations that are access issues, things that we could be supporting families around for this upcoming year?
Right. I think largely transportation was a big factor, especially if there was anything midday related. And so that's another reason why offering a full day program and having bookend transportation really tight with families and kids, I think will help a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question and then Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. Are we making any efforts to keep summer school sites local to kids' neighborhood schools?
Yeah, I'll start and then Nicole can chime in. We've already made some shifts as of last week to our original identified sites and made shifts based on what a bus ride might be for some students. And so we moved it back. A reminder, our high schools are closed again next summer for construction. So we're combining high school into some of our paired elementary and middle sites, but we take that into consideration. I can let Nicole add a little more, but we have just made adjustments again to ensure accommodation of students and transportation. It's not a long bus ride.
Yeah. So what we try to do is, I mean, really look almost geographically, like looking at a map and grouping, because we recognize that we can't have every site open. So then we do focus on the feeder patterns as much as possible to minimize the transportation of time and combine services and that way.
And then my last question is, if a student's teacher does elect to serve in summer school, are we making efforts so that that student has that teacher for summer school as well?
I think that depends. I think that we try to keep staff at the site where the students are because it's familiar and they know that student, they know that community, and they know that family. We don't always ensure that teacher has that student for a variety of reasons, but the location and the connection to the community is very important.
All right, thank you. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt and Board Member Mayor Mullen.
Yeah, I just thought of one more question, a quick question for Janet. You said in the slides that the program needs to be running out of MSCR Central and the new MSCR West. Everything on schedule with the renovations of those spaces so that they'll be set to go for summer? And is there anything you need from us?
Okay. Cindy gave us a little reminder about what's on the agenda, but anyway, we definitely are anticipating being able to offer programs at both of those sites in the summer, and working very closely with building services and Cedric Cotto's team to make sure that happen. We're really, really close at MSCR Central. We anticipate being in there in the next couple of weeks. And we now have permits to begin work over at MSCR West. And so that process shouldn't be as complicated as the MSCR Central project was, because of the building is quite old that we needed to remodel.
Okay, that's great. And then I'm just excited to start hearing about it in the community, about these new sites and how we're going to be able to utilize them and hopefully serve more students and families and community members. So definitely. All right, thank you.
I have one request also on summer school. I think that was the next question. Was I the next person? Okay, I wanted to make sure. My one request is, can we please avoid the fourth floor of Randall, or third floor of Randall, where they can't air condition it. Because every year I get emails every summer from parents saying my kid is going to bathe there on the third floor of Randall and you can't open it.
Yeah, so right now, Nicole and I in building services, we've been working closely for many, many months on coordinating what programs are going to be in what schools this summer. And as of right now, Randall will, I believe, only have some West High School athletic programming there. There won't be any childcare or summer semester in the CR programming.
Sorry, but after 6 years, I keep getting the same emails, just their siblings instead of the original parent. Now we've got sibling. So I appreciate it.
We will be serving those, our Wisconsin Youth Company will be serving those Randall families at Franklin this summer.
Thank you.
Just for fun, let's remember that we're gonna have at least 1 or 2 hot days during the summer.
Of course.
We have to get water out to the school and fans and all that again.
Field day outside.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, and Cindy, did you want to wrap us up?
Thank you. Well, then, Castro. We appreciate all the comments and all of the feedback and the input. We'll take that into consideration. There's just 2 additional things that I want to make sure we close out in terms of, I think board member Drew brought this up, like we're really trying to think differently about how we are serving students in summer. We know there's some things we need to do around academics, and we also want to ensure that we're creating other programming for students so that we can re-engage students and create opportunities that sometimes the school year and the school day don't allow us to do that. And with that, I wanted to make sure that it was mentioned, we are also having summer programming at Metro sites. We know it was a miss last year, so we're really excited to ensure that happens. And I can't leave without uplifting the partners that we're working with to create paid summer internships for our young people. It is such an amazing opportunity for them to get school experience and get paid, especially when many of them are wage earners. So the partnerships that we are cultivating with business and industry to ensure that happens, I think is huge. I think every year we get better and better and increase that. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you to all of my team. And we will close out and we will move on to our second topic of the night.
All right, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Let's go.
Thank you all.
Jesse, can you pull up the slides, please?
Sure.
As Cindy mentioned, we're moving on to item 6.1, a overview of the draft of a special education plan and development. And for us will be Cindy and Dr. Mofenter.
Thank you so much, Board Member Castro. I am going to have Dr. Mofenter join us. She is coming up to the table right now. And I am going to turn it over to her to give us a little bit of an update and where we are with our initial phases of thinking about our updated plan.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, everyone, for allowing me to be here to speak with you about what's happening with our the development of the new draft special education plan. So I just have to say, I love the picture. I didn't pick it, but it makes me think about summer and playing outside. So that was a fun thought for tonight. So a couple of things that I have presented to the Board of Education, our quality metrics that we are using in special education, as well as our SMART goals. So this slide that's currently up really relates to where we know we are now and where we're going. This is just a sampling of the data that we're working from, that we worked from to develop our 3 SMART goals. But we have a clear vision in MMSD to increase inclusive opportunities for our scholars with an IEP right now. And one of the ways that we measure that is we have 3 different educational categories that we have to report to DPI on. And the most inclusive one is that our scholars spend 80% or more of their time in general education classes with peers who don't have identified disabilities. Right now, we're district-wide at 81.25%. That is actually well above state and national average, but we still want to have more inclusive opportunities. So we want to expand those, and that's one of our SMART goals. We recognize in the school district that we have disproportionality in special education. And so right here is just another snapshot of our data that we're working from. We have about 15% of our scholars overall identified as having special education service needs, but when it comes to our scholars who are Black, about 27% of those have special education needs identified. So we recognize that disproportionality, and we've talked about that before, is a tremendous issue. So we're looking at reductions in overall special education representation as well as discipline. On the gray side, a couple of snapshots. The create inclusion data, 78.6% of scholars who experienced seclusion or restraint last year had an IEP, and about 38% of those were scholars with an IEP who are Black. So looking to decrease those with some targeted efforts. And then lastly, a SMART goal around academic proficiency. What I have listed below is just elementary school. We have data for other levels as well, but right now about 21% of our scholars with an IEP or last year scored proficient in reading and language arts, and 23% in math. So we want to increase those academic proficiency levels. And all of this is toward increased graduation rates for our scholars with an IEP. And so when it comes to our special education plan, I know that one of the things you all asked for, and Jesse, thank you very much for providing that, was a copy of the plan that was in place prior. If I remember right, it was 132 or 133 pages. And personally, I didn't find it to be it may have been a wonderful compilation of all the things we think about across the district and in special education, but in terms of a plan to describe what we do in special education to lead to better outcomes for our scholars with an IEP, that's a lot of writing. And I didn't necessarily find that the organization was as helpful as I think it could have been. So along with other staff and administrators in the district, we came up with the proposal. And so I want to just at this juncture clarify for all of you that the intent this evening is to let you know where we are with an outline. So what I'm about to present to you and what you saw on the PDF document of the proposed outline is what we want. We want to take an outline, and then we want to input all of the information, the things that we're doing, and add to that as we go over time. So as we discover a new intervention or we train staff on new strategies, we would add those to the plan and continue to track our data by level all along. So what I'm presenting to you here is a proposed outline. It doesn't contain any of the details, right? So we're trying to get the outline nailed down so that then we can fill this in with what we're going to be doing, what we are doing and will be doing in special education. So the PDF that you all received as Board of Education members, you see that it's broken down by early childhood, early elementary, and so on. So we've really tried to distinguish when we know that there are shifts in the way that special education services are delivered based on the skills that those skills and standards for that level of scholar. We want to make sure that we're not using any blanket approaches across the district. We want to make sure we're targeting those for the level of scholar, just like our academic standards and our social and emotional standards are broken down. So we've started to gather some input from staff, family members, and the Special Education Advisory Council. And so this has changed over the past couple of months based on feedback. But we would start our outline by level with the SMART goals data and the quality metrics data. And then again, we would look at that data on a regular basis and could add to it so that we can see right in the plan what our baseline is, and every quarter and then every year how our data looks by level. So I think it's really important to look at that data regularly and to keep it in front of people so that we can assure that we continue to move forward. The next thing that we would look at, we have right now a professional learning plan for the department, for special education staff, and we also have one that's specific to our special education assistants. And so we want to ensure that meaningful inclusion is emphasized for both general education and co-curricular activities. That was some of the feedback that we've gotten from staff and family members, was making sure that we're covering both of those when we're providing professional learning for our staff. The third section of the outline by level would include key instructional strategies, starting with what we provide in general education, because you've heard it before, and it's just so true that all of our scholars are general education scholars first. So really want to capture in the plan what our tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions are. So that can be prior to a special education referral. That can also be for a scholar with special education services in one or more areas. That doesn't mean that they don't also have access to general education interventions. We also want to outline the specific ways that we're implementing universal design for learning in our classrooms and schools, and all of the access that our scholars and staff have to assistive technology and professional learning in assistive technology. That is a required part of the IEP, and it's also a mandated service under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We have some great assistive technology staff members and offerings, so we want to make sure we capture that and then grow in that area. Next, we really want to capture, this is something that I have for the past 2 years worked on compiling. What are the special education interventions that we have available at each level and school, and what staff are trained in those? That includes materials that we purchase, hard copies as well as virtual, electronic materials, tools that we use, the curricula that we use for specially designed instruction delivery, and interventions for our scholars with an IEP. So I believe it's really important for our plan to have that captured and outlined, and when we add something new or when we discover that data don't support something, that we're taking that away, that the plan reflect what we're doing currently over the years. And then lastly, something else that was a wonderful addition from staff and family members was just that we want to make sure that we have specific ways that we're promoting self-direction and self-determination for our scholars with an IEP. The fourth section, you've all heard about our anti-racist IEP process. We're also working to develop an initial referral process that uses anti-racist language and information for families, scholars, and educators. And we would also use that during 3-year reevaluation processes. So we want to capture how often those are being used by level. We want to capture the growth that we're seeing in our educators. We want to capture family input related to those processes. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we know by level and school how families are specifically being engaged in processes, what different staff at different levels and schools have different ways that they communicate and support families to understand the IEP and the process and get their input. We want to share that information. I really see the development of a new plan as a way that staff can share best practices with each other across the district in ways that I don't think we've done as much of as we could have in the past. We have a post-IEP survey. We want to grow the number of families that complete that. And last year we had approximately a 10% response rate. So we know what the data look like there. And then just making sure that our families understand anti-racist IEP and evaluation processes and can give their feedback into both processes. So this is the outline, again, by level would be completed with information about specifics, what we're doing, what our staff are doing, how we're implementing special education services and supporting our scholars to have positive outcomes. And then the last slide is just categories of stakeholders that we are working to engage. The goal, I didn't include this in the slides, but the goal is really to have the outline ready with, people feeling good about the outline that's going to be used to capture all of this information by level within the next 6 to 8 weeks, so that then we can work with staff at each building and level to complete the information and then have the plan fully drafted for review by stakeholders, including the Board of Education, by the end of the school year, early summer. So we're gathering input at this point from special education staff. We will also include general education staff in some of our feedback sessions, working in a variety of ways to work to get information from families, the Special Education Advisory Council, and then we had 2 guest speakers early in the meeting, and I would be happy to go to any group to present information. So I haven't yet been asked, but as soon as I am, I have offered to do that. So.
Okay, all right, Board Member Vandermolen.
Yes, it's an outline. I'm going to be nice, critical, and I've learned that my constructive criticism needs to actually be constructive. So we're working on it. 1, no offense, but 3% is too low. I'm sorry, but that can be 3 students in a class. We need to increase the amount that children are doing well by more than 3%. If we're ever going to have a chance of them ever breaking the achievement gap and to have these services, it just will not work. Anything under 10% isn't feasible. I'm sorry, but we're already behind. COVID has pushed us further behind. We don't get started, we never will. If we aren't ambitious, we won't be it. Regarding UDL, yes, it needs to be mandatory, not just in buildings, but with teachers and staff. There are trainings, and I get that. But what we need is staffing. You can't do universal design if you don't have enough staff who provide it. If you do not have the teachers who are able to do it, that's very difficult. If you have a special ed teacher who has 5 students and 3 of them are autistic and runners, they're going to be running it for those students. And very simply, the rest will not be included because it's not physically possible. And trust me, I've been out sprinted by several 6-year-olds and put me to shame many a time. As for anti-racist IEPs, all for it, but want to know the most anti-racist IEP you could have? One that's followed completely, followed definitely, and followed to truly support the child and the child's needs. And that means if the parents and child speak Spanish, Hmong, whatever language at home, that needs to be translated not a month later, but so they have it before the IEP meeting, because there's no way you could participate in the IEP meeting, which is one of the most stressful things ever, if you don't have it in your native tongue. It's not possible. As for over identification, I think you're right and you're wrong, and I'll explain why I say that. We have an over identification in emotional and behavioral. We have an under identification in learning disabilities because we refused to test it. Instead, we assume that every Black male has emotional and behavioral disabilities and issues. No, I kind of get teed off too if I'm constantly being the one blamed for absolutely everything. However, we have done nothing about checking the dyslexia rate in the African American population in the city. It happens to be pretty decent and needs to be checked and provided for. Special ed isn't necessarily a bad thing when you judge them on behavior. and use the behavior education plan as a way to do it. That's the problem. And then we need to increase parents, obviously. Seclusion and restraint is a no, period. End of story. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear that kids are being restrained. My God, we did the George Floyd hold on children 5 years before his case happened. 5-year-olds, we did it on. Kids can die. I'm not okay with that. I just can't be. And my last one, you already stated meeting with the groups. I'm fine with that. My absolute last thing would be on transition. We start too late. I know the law says 14 for academic, 16 for vocational. I think we need to start at middle school, honestly. I honestly think we need to do career shadowing so kids have an idea of what they're doing, because they don't know what those classes are and how they work. And if we don't know that it's a possibility, are you really going to try for it? Or are you just going to assume it will all work out and someone will tell you what to do? Sorry for the soliloquy, but I figure on this particular one I was allowed to. Thank you.
All right, so Board Member Pearson, followed by Board Member Nichols, followed by Board Member Simpson.
Yeah, thank you. My question is just, as I was looking through this, I'm not really seeing any information about how we are connecting some of our children that have IEPs with advanced learning. We do have data that shows that there are numerous of children who have IEPs who have also been identified as being advanced learners as well. So I guess if you guys can just talk about that piece and how that kind of connects to ensuring that, you know, you're also helping with the development mind.
Sure. So in terms of the outline, it's a really good question. And I think that it's important to include something in the outline to determine how we are addressing the needs of students that have advanced learning support needs as well as special education services. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Yeah.
Add it to the information that we're compiling to determine what else we can do, which is really the point of the plan, right? To figure out what else do we need to be doing to support our scholars to have the best possible outcomes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols.
Okay, thank you for sharing this, Dr. Molfenter. A couple of things since this is an outline. The one thing that I want to start with before giving any like just, I don't know, specific reactions to the outline is it's more at the board level. And I'm curious, in my mind, there is a difference between a plan and how the plan is being implemented. And I actually believe, in my own humble opinion, that I think what board members care about is like how things are being implemented and then what are the outcomes. I'm not saying the plan isn't important, but it is kind of the day-to-day, what's happening in schools, what's happening with our young folks and their families. So I'd be curious if you could talk about like how you see the purpose of a 3-year plan. And where like annual implementation and monitoring comes in and yeah, I'm curious because I know in the past we had very big comprehensive plans that were multi-year that did lay out kind of a blueprint, but there were a lot of updates that came back to the board in like annual monitoring and steps within a plan that kind of illustrated the direction we were going. So I'm just curious, like what from your leadership stance, how are you seeing this plan being used? And who is it intended for?
Sure. So I will say that my intention is to take the 3 SMART goals that we have developed, and to Nikki's point as well, to continue to work toward those goals, meaning that we know that as a large school district and system, that we set goals based on previous data, right? We've looked at 5 and 10-year trends. And so I think Nikki's comment about the 10%, by the end of 3 years, we would most certainly hope to be closer to there, moving forward 3% a year, right? So we would look at, so in terms of tracking the data, so that's the first part of the outline is we've captured now our baseline by level and by school, which will be included in the plan. And then to your question about the intent of this outline is to lay out the how. So the intent of this outline is to lay out how we are working with scholars, how staff are working with scholars every day in schools to move us toward the benchmarks that we've set in our SMART goals. So the first part of this plan really just outlines what you've all seen before, our SMART goals, as well as our quality metrics that we use. Some of those are required by DPI and others we've built in ourselves because we believe they're important as a department and a school district, but the how will be written here so that parents, families, community members, all of you will know what staff are doing and staff will know what staff are doing. And I say that to mean that within the same building or the same level, not everybody knows what each other's doing. And they, that sharing of best practices that I spoke to, the goal is to embed in this document how best practice services are being delivered so that staff can share those with each other, but so that it's also transparent. And knowing that, particularly parents of scholars with an IEP.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you want to be able to provide a comprehensive view by grade level of all the different things that are kind of being utilized and how we're and aligned to data and using data. I'm sorry, aligned to goals and using data so that there's some transparency about that.
Correct.
Okay, great. So then the implementation of those things and the results and outcomes, those would come forward to the board probably annually, or I don't know if they're coming forward at the end of a 3-year period. I would hope not. And I don't know if that this is going back to kind of like a previous cycle of research and evaluation. There used to be a little bit of a cycle of when things would come back to the board with a little bit more of like kind of internal formal evaluation. So you may not have the answer to that tonight, but yeah, I'm just curious if we're recalibrating on older versions of plans and kind of what comes back to the board.
So I'll just chime in a little here to that question. I don't think we've determined yet when that comes back to the board. I think that's part of the conversation that needs to happen once Nancy kind of gets the plan more fleshed out. In terms of data, the other thing I just want to mention is every one of our schools has a school improvement plan. And within that school improvement plan, students with an IEP are identified. And so just another ways we're thinking about the data and the monitoring is happening through what schools use as their driver at the school level, which is their SIP. So I just wanted to name that. I think we have to have discussions about what comes back to the board and when, outside of what we've already identified, right? We have data that we've said the board will see at the end of a semester. And then we said there's data that the board will see at the end of the year. But specific to the plan, I think it's part of the discussion we still need to determine and where it fits into all of our work that we're doing around the recalibration of the strategic framework and how it all fits.
And in short, just like when we're working together, I'm working with the board in terms of what we want to see. We want to see it, and then I'll kind of have to work with the community to see who's coming back. There have been times when I have school-based people coming back because we hear directly from them, so you can know the day-to-day plan almost. And you don't want to see everything, but you do evidence of something. It would be a bad idea to talk about then how we fit it into the instructional.
Thank you. So overall, I'd say based on your outline, I do like including SMART goals. I I wonder in a 3-year plan if the SMART goals are like for each year, or it becomes like a large 3-year SMART goal. I'm not sure, but I do like the specificity of having SMART goals with very clear language around kind of a benchmark or an increase that you're hoping to accomplish. I do like the grade level breakdown. I think that's important. What I noticed in your grade level breakdown is that the current key data points, the SMART goals, the staff professional learning plan, and the key instructional strategies are kind of they seem foundational for every grade band. I'm curious how the anti-racist IEP, how that differs by grade band, or if that's more, that would apply just as a focus of the department. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think part of that, that's a great question and comment, that one of the things we'll be tracking is we have a way to capture data about the utilization of the tools by level. So that'll be part of the data that we include annually in the outline of the plan. And then also the other way that it differs is that families of younger children sometimes have been involved in the process for much less time. So they're in a different place with needing staff and support, sometimes our person, to just help them understand the process and how to best provide input, and that they do have a voice and that they're an equal member of the IEP team. But for parents of, let's say, middle or high school children, they may have experienced multiple years of an IEP with racist language. And so then we're in a different, so we're doing it differently. We're asking staff to help bring younger, like families of younger children maybe into the team in a different way early on. And for families of older children, sometimes they have had some negative experiences with IEPs and being part of the process. So we're asking staff to be sensitive to that and recognize that they just, really need to be assured that they're an equal member and that their voice matters and that we want the IEP to look racist to them.
Got it. Okay, thank you for kind of putting some context to why that's included at each grade band. Okay, well, so then my last comments generally around family engagement. A few things. One, I see that you've included deaf and hard of hearing services as a category of students and families that would need that, as well as blind and visually impaired. I don't see anything listed for families who need language support other than English. So I think that would be an important group to include. I also don't see anything listed around parent-teacher conferences. There's a lot here on IEP, but I think, at least when I worked in the district, I feel like families who had students with special needs or even the language, like oftentimes felt very excluded in the parent-teacher conference format. And so maybe there's something in here relative to the family engagement strategy around that. And then one of the things I guess I'm very curious about as you're starting to gather stakeholder feedback is, have you all specifically reached out to Black parents of Black children who are in special ed?
It's huge.
Because I feel like there has to be a real effort on talking to parents in our district. I'm not saying all parents are important, so I hope that you're going to reach out to even some of the speakers we heard in public comment. But because of the disproportionality in particular, I feel like it's key. And so I would hope there's a real effort to figure out how you're going to get some focus groups or some one-on-ones or whatever it takes. Has there been any effort so far? Okay, good.
But not so far. So we have 3 people that are have been asked to work specifically on communication with our families of Black scholars. So one of them is Nakaya Wiley. She's the coordinator of professional learning, and she's the lead on our anti-racist IEP project. And then we hired 2 LTE staff, Sandra Brown and Jolanda Gibney, to also do outreach. And they actually coordinated an event, an anti-racist IEP event on December 6th. And 100 people came, and it was like, it was at the Boys and Girls Club. And
oh, beautiful.
Like it was really, and so, but they're making phone calls and sitting down with families individually to gather feedback.
Okay, I'm so happy to hear that. So one of the things, and this is just a suggestion, you can take it or leave it. I think as you all are coming back and you are reviewing what folks are saying about the outline and what else they think should be included, my hope would be there's a way that you all are getting either some help with your qualitative data, you know, kind of the anecdotal, the direct quotes and testimony in some ways so that you all are really able to honor like how the data came in and who it came from, I guess is what I'm saying, so that you're really trying to center and honor that feedback.
Good. I gotta think about that. Just think about how to do it. Yeah. So far, it's just kind of in my head. It needs another way.
Okay. You know, but overall, I think the overall outline is okay. This is good to go.
Mr. Castro, I'm sorry. We have Ms. Stanford Taylor, engagement officer.
I see.
Okay.
Did you have something to add, Ms. Stanford Taylor?
I did. Thank you so much. And Board Member Nichols, thank you so much for bringing that up, because we do have an opportunity that's coming up. We are in planning with Blacks for Political and Social Action to have a parent forum that will be taking place in February. Right now, the tentative date is February 25th. And I see this fitting in very well with that forum as questions we can pose to parents and get input from parents around special education. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because in discussions, we can make sure that happens.
Thank you.
All right, Board Member Simpkin, followed by Board Member Gomes-Schmidt, followed by Board Member Vandermolen.
Thank you. First, I'm going to say, Nancy, I really appreciate the style of your plan. This matches really well with my brain and how I consume information, so I'm appreciating it. I am looking forward to seeing the data that comes forward with these SMART goals and how we see some movement as a result of the steps, these universal steps that you're expecting to take. And I appreciate how broad each of those universal categories is, so that you are truly individualizing an IEP experience for each child. My questions are, first of all, around restraint and seclusion, because I think of that as being something that we really need to get a handle on as quickly as possible, especially around overrepresentation of Black students that are experiencing restraint and seclusion. When I look at your points 2 and 3, so staff professional learning plan and needs, and 3 key instructional strategies, I can infer that you have intentions around the reduction of restraint and seclusion and learning in the staff professional learning plan, and then learning for number 3, learning different strategies to work with students. But I'm just inferring that. And so I'm wondering if that is something that you would consider having be more explicit within your outline.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So I just added. I just made a note. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Okay. The second piece is, as I'm looking at, for middle school and for high school, I'm looking at, number 1 through 5. What I don't see lifted up is the voice of the student in the family engagement process. I do see you have the section on promoting self-direction and self-determination. And so I'm wondering, can you speak to that a little more? I'm wondering if that is what I'm feeling like I'm missing, or if there's.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Well, in section 3D, which some of these may shift a little bit back in business of the outline, but the intent there is just to make sure that staff understand at each level how important it is to build in ways for students to be self-directed and self-determined, whether be as part of participating in their IP process, leading their IP team, talking about what goals they have for themselves, thinking about what their interests are connected to what they're learning at school. But I hadn't thought about that section as related to family engagement. So now you have me thinking about how to include the student. When I think about family engagement, I really think about parents and other family members. So how to embed that into section 5.
What is coming to my mind is the student, when able and willing and interested, being able to be part of the evaluation process of their own plan. Along with, I mean, I know that students can be involved in the development of their own IEP, but also including them in making sure that their voice is held up and asked for throughout the process.
And now that you've said that, I know in my own experience, when students are more part of the process and let's say leading their own IEP, family members seem much more interested in the IEP. Understandably so, right? Listening to their child versus listening to staff.
So, and then the last piece I just wanted to lift up is we have these very active parent groups, parents with students with IEPs. And I'm wondering, how do you intend to engage parent groups in any sort of systematic way?
Sure, that's a great question. So I offer every single month, I offer a Zoom to all families. And so until this process is completed, so starting last month, during the Zoom, this is what we talked about. And so all families have an opportunity to participate in those Zooms. And they also have an opportunity to provide me with, if they can attend the Zoom, to look at the content and then provide me with feedback or information afterwards. And so some of our, advocacy groups, while people that are involved in those knew what was happening, I would also be more than happy to attend their own meetings to present the same information I'm presenting to you and get feedback a variety of ways from those groups.
I'm wondering about access to being a part of the live conversation. So we know that families that have, that have two parents or one parent at full time are unable to attend the day Zooms even. When are you doing them?
So I alternate based on feedback from parents. One in the evening and then the next month over lunch, and then the next one in the evening and then the next one over lunch.
Okay.
Because some people prefer evening and some people prefer over the lunch hour.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
What's the one on December 12th?
So there was one on December 12th and the next one is February 1st. The one on February 1st is in the evening. Because the last one was over the lunch hour. Yeah, I could share.
All right, Board Member Gomez Schmidt, followed by Board Member Vandermolen, then I'll.
I lowered my hand, so I don't need it.
Got it. Thank you. Then I'll add myself to the queue.
Thank you. And thank you for this information. I do have a lot of questions and I am going to do my best to be concise and have this be like and sort of learning along with you here because I this is really important. I think for the board and the public to understand how we are transitioning from this document. As you pointed out, it was a very extensive and comprehensive document, but the actual plan was only 45 pages. There's about 80 pages, I would say, that is appendices and data and research and supporting documents for how this plan was built. And so I just want to make sure in the process that we don't lose all that in the process. A lot of the data was built on MAP, which our district has transitioned into using other metrics. So I think it's really important that as we go forward, we're using this as a guide to understand where we've been and we don't just throw this out and start anew. So I guess one of the questions that I have is, how do we see this being used as a transition? The board approved this in October of 2016. It was a 3-year plan that was supposed to expire in 2019. But how do we see this process going forward? Because I guess under my assumption, the special ed department and how it functioned was still working under this until the board approves a new plan. So I guess I'm interested process wise. I've heard you say that you're building this out. This is the outline and the framework, and then it will be coming back to the board for feedback after you build this out much more extensively. Is that accurate in that it's going to come back to the board for approval and then it replaces what was board approved in 2016? Correct. Okay. Thank you. And then there was, as part of the process, and I know a lot of things got changed due to COVID. In November of 2019, the board approved a budget expenditure for West Ed to do an evaluation of the special education plan. And I wasn't on the board at that time, but I know from my onboarding process that got delayed due to COVID. Did we continue with that evaluation with West Ed over the last couple of years? And do we have an evaluation report from them that was a product of that expenditure?
Yes, it was actually concluded. Their evaluation was concluded in the spring of 2020, and we have the report.
Oh.
We have a full report that's been provided to the board as well as a summary. Executive report that's been provided to the board.
Okay.
Probably prior to.
Okay. Can you provide that to us again so that
Yes,
we can
please.
take a look and review that? So I guess both the full report and the executive summary of that report would be.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. And I would say too that we have compiled baseline data for this plan. And so where we're in a different world now, I think, than we were when that one was written, is that it will be provided in the form of links in these plans, in this plan once it's approved. So so all of that will be included.
Okay.
This plan will not be absent of data.
Oh, perfect. I'm really happy to hear that, trust me. And so another question that I have is it does reference, the outline right now references that there are qualitative and quantitative data that has been collected over the past several school years that we already have as baseline. So can we look at that baseline data as this is being built out to better understand the context of where we're at and where we're moving? I understand that the SMART goals have like these 3% increases, but if we don't know where we're starting from, I know you provided a few examples, but is there a way we can see the baseline data to better understand that in context?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's great. And then another question I have is on page 3, you referenced the quality metrics that we are going to continue to use. So 8 quality metrics, the compliance with timelines, the compliance with quality and equity standards, and these are broken out under 8 different categories here. One of the questions that I have and things that I've heard coming from schools is that one of the challenges, and you highlight that's in here, are number 6 and number 7, that IEPs are implemented as written and that IEPs are revised when the data suggests that they're not actually getting the outcomes that they're intended to get. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 things as critically important, that when we're building this out, that we really understand how that comes as a feedback loop. I guess I would be really interested in a board member to better understand how we know that IEPs are being implemented as they're written. And I guess the student and parent experience with that, and the staff experience too.
Sure. So we, a minimum of twice a year, we ask our schools to give us a service delivery plan that has every single student at that school with an IEP, what services they have in their IEP, when they're provided, who provides them. We make sure that the minutes are met and we make sure that they're in the right environment, because those are some of the components that are required in the IEP outlines what services, how many minutes, what environment. So we ask them to lay that out. Because when we start to hear things from program support teacher or principal, like, we're not able to meet minutes, then we go and, either myself or an assistant director goes into that school and sits down with the school team and says, let's put it all on paper. We gotta have to the point about having a plan and implementing the plan, but you have to have a plan first. So who's providing it? When are they providing it? How are they providing it? And then if there are gaps, then that's when we know, to board member Vandermeulen's point, that we need to figure out something with our staffing. But what we do is we look on paper to see this number of special education staff, this number of scholars, this number of minutes, how are those being implemented? So that's how we measure that, is by our twice a year service delivery plan reviews that we have lay eyes on for every single school. And then it is now the perfect time of year to ask about number 7, because after second quarter, or at the end of first semester, is when we sit down with all of our program support teachers and look at progress reports from first and second quarter. And if there are scholars who haven't made sufficient progress for 2 quarters in a row, then we ask them to have an IPT meeting to talk about changing that.
Okay.
Well, that's how we're documenting the number of scholars that are in that situation. What these are.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing up the staffing component of this and how important that is. And that sort of, it feeds into my next question about compliance with evidence-based practice standards, because I know that a lot of the goals that we have here under the evidence-based practice standards, increasing the time in the general education environment, reducing the number with shortened day, the number of scholars with shortened day, all of these things that we're putting goals around puts pressure back on the general classroom environment to be adequately staffed and our special education department to be adequately staffed. So I know we've had staffing challenges, and then also the big lift it is to do the PD for new staff that we are onboarding and sort of keeping up with that. How do you see that sort of challenge being reflected when this document is being built out?
So as we build out the outline in terms of our professional learning plan, we did just hire a new person for our professional learning team in student services. So I'm really excited about that. We hired someone who brings some really great expertise in terms of interventions, and also board member Simpkin, to your point, is a train the trainer in nonviolent crisis intervention and the verbal de-escalation strategies versus use of restraint and seclusion. So as we build out the key instructional strategies, that's when we're going to identify if any schools or levels have gaps that we need to beef up professional learning, that we need to beef up the strategies that are being used. And we intentionally included the general education interventions and universal design for learning and assistive technology, because those are all things that as a department in student services, we want to make sure that our general education teachers have support to implement those as well. So that students are receiving what they need in all of the environments they're in, not just through their specially designed instructions.
Okay, that's great. Then just a couple more things. I noticed that in the previous plan, it talks a little bit about results-driven accountability. That is the revised accountability system from the Federal Office of Special Ed Programming. And Wisconsin as a state has chosen literacy outcomes as its focus. Is this going to be like further reflected in the plan that you're developing? I see that there's academic outcomes, but are we going to connect in with those Wisconsin goals around literacy, especially given that we have such a strong focus on the science of reading and literacy now through all our grade levels?
Absolutely. So that the SMART goal number 3, to increase the number of our scholars with an IEP who score proficient in reading. And absolutely, when we're building out the interventions that we use to ensure that scholars are learning via the science of reading, and that will also include those tier 1, 2, and 3 general education interventions, will include accessing the differentiation strategies that are embedded in our new curriculum that we purchased and that teachers are getting trained on now. I would also just say that, like everyone in this room, I am a firm believer that we need to emphasize and focus on reading, but our math scores are quite problematic as well. Our proficiency scores in math are quite, so I don't want to lose math just, because we're only emphasizing reading. And I think it's important to emphasize both equally.
I agree with you. I agree. But the literacy piece is so critical. You have to, read to learn, read to learn after a certain point, right? And so making sure that our scholars are prepared to do that along with the math is, really important. Then another thing, I appreciate having this divided by levels, because that there's probably many different ways that the services look different by grade level. I'm also wondering, when I look at the special education staffing allocations in the budget book, which is what the board approves, it's broken down by the type of disability, by how students are identified. Because there is a very large and diverse way that students are identified under special education. So I'm wondering, is there going to be anything in the plan that talks about what disability the student might be identified and how that might differ in how the plans are provided or the amount of support that's needed?
So to answer the first part of the question, so we will continue to use that weighted formula that was developed several years ago.
That the board didn't get to vote on.
I'm sorry.
That the board didn't get to vote on. You weren't here then.
I'll just say I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
But however, after going through this process last year using the weighted formula, I have had some very serious questions about that weighted formula that was developed prior to me being in this position, because it really doesn't seem to work very well. Because just because you're a scholar who served under a certain category doesn't seem to have similar support needs to others who are. And that kind of speaks to the second part of your question too, is that the category of special education services I'm served under is really not the important part in special education. It's really what my needs are and what the skills I need to develop are and what knowledge I need to gain. And so we don't want to get too tied into labels. We really want to, and so I think that we want to move toward ensuring that scholars are getting what they need.
Through the IEP process.
Right, and through all of the services that we're providing versus
Can I catch Nichelle up on something really quick? Nichelle, on the weighted formula, which was before you were here.
But I was in that member state when it was being created.
Okay, then never mind, you understand.
But I don't.
Well,
You can tell me about it.
Yes, and Laura.
Sure,
But basically what the weighted formula is how much time per category the person is in. Problem being is if you take a selective disorder, and I'm gonna use mine of autism or cerebral palsy, someone with a more severe portion on the spectrum may need more services than someone that has a less severe version of the disorder. The problem being is that you're comparing kid against kid over, oh, well, you're not as disabled, so therefore you don't need as many services. And that goes back to the entire, now we're literally saying, well, you're not disabled enough, so you don't need this.
I see, thank you.
And then they don't get their needs met. Did I miss anything on that part? I don't.
So I think we can discuss this at a different time, but I just wanted to ask actually how that is included and how it's basically considered when we're developing such plans and my other question is this is very IEP focused. Do 504s fall under special education and will they be considered in this plan?
So a scholar with a 504 plan doesn't receive special education services. They have accommodations. And so it's different. We could certainly consider combining them together. And I think that's not a bad idea. But if we're calling it the special education plan, it would just be called something a little bit different then, right? Because
we do special ed in 504 plan.
I'm just curious, are the 504s taken, are the accountability for that, did that fall under special education or who?
The accountability it's under student services.
So it is.
Accountability measures are just.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's totally different.
One's federal, one's state.
Especially, and I really think we ought to hold off on this kind of conversation right here until we can come back and give you more accurate information, because this could go in a whole lot of ways.
Yep.
Come out 504 and I.
Yep, and that's what, as I understand it, it's much broader, so, yeah, I just wanted to just throw that out as a consideration as we're talking about this.
Thank you, that's scary.
Yeah, one federal, one state.
My last question is just making sure we keep a lens on how this fits with requirements for PI 25 at risk and our PI 26 education for employment and academic and career planning. So just like board member Pearson talked about the twice exceptional students, and I think someone also mentioned how this overlaps with English language learners, also how this overlaps with the other requirements that we have that also include special education students. So that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So December 2021, I believe DPI issued a new rule that community folks can be involved in an IEP meeting should a parent request so, kind of as like a third party. And I'm wondering if that will be a part of any plan, as folks have noted. Some parents have had some negative experiences in IEP planning, so kind of the ability for parents to request outside counsel in some way when an IEP meeting is underway. I guess it's more of a comment or ask for consideration. My second comment or question is, board members have noted that for Black students in particular, they are overrepresented in quote unquote behavioral disabilities, but underrepresented in others. And I'm wondering, for families who may not have access to healthcare to get a diagnosis on something, have we considered partnering with a healthcare provider that can help close the gap and disparity of diagnosis for certain disabilities?
So to speak to your first question, we have been working relatively hard to communicate out to Laura Moffett, the family ombudsperson, last March. is available to talk to families and connect them with any advocacy. Family members, parents and family members have actually been allowed for many years to bring whoever they want to an IEPT meeting. So that they don't have to ask us, we ask them to let us know just so that we can communicate with all the people that need to be communicated with, but they don't even have to do that. So they can show up with anybody except if they show up with an attorney, and we can't hold them without one of our attorneys. That's just, but anybody else, they could bring advocacy. And provides lots of resources to families when they reach out to her. So I think we have a great resource in having a family ombudsperson in the school district, and we're one of the few that do. So that's been really helpful.
Can you share how we came about that family ombudsman? How it came about?
Yeah, we had multiple families and advocacy organizations recommend that to us as the school district. So we moved forward with hiring a person to be a support to our families in that way.
And that's a rarity to have someone speaking on behalf of the family to the district in that conversation and guide that. So, and she's been wonderful. And families now have access to be in a meeting in the future to us directly with support. And thank you too for bringing me on that. We're Madtown moms of that. Appreciate it.
And I'm gonna apologize. I know you asked a second question. No, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, in helping families without healthcare get a medical diagnosis for certain disabilities.
Sure. So we have collaborative efforts that we work with our early childhood centers. We have staff out in daycares and working with early childhood, and whenever a medical professional recommends to a family that they talk to us about a referral, we work pretty closely with them. So medical diagnoses don't mean that a scholar necessarily gets special education services. We have to do our own evaluation always. So what we really want to train our staff to do more than ask medical professionals about diagnoses is we want to make sure that our staff are paying attention for signs of potential need. And what we do first in the vast majority of situations is we provide interventions for that scholar and we track progress. So, and that's part of the requirements under DPI and federal law, but it also, we work really hard to make sure that we have interventions at the ready and staff who are paying attention, because if a scholar comes into second or third grade as a struggling reader, we provide interventions and they respond well and move up toward grade level, then we don't want to identify a scholar just because they've missed opportunities, right? So that's not the same thing as having a need for special education services. I don't know if does that answer your question, or did I?
Yes and no, but
Okay.
Yeah, I'll come back. And then my last one, are you looking at any quality metrics related to social and emotional learning?
So we only in the sense that we've looked at quality metrics for response to intervention for our scholars who have been identified as having some needs in that area. So I think it would be a good idea to add that to our key instructional strategies that we compile. So I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you. Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you, Board Member Castro, for both of these conversations. I think the pairing of these conversations seems relevant to me. The last time we talked about special education was really within the context of restraint and seclusion. And I remember that conversation vividly because it was paired with a conversation around our opportunity. And so I said, hey, we see this overrepresentation of Black students being incarcerated, and what are we going to do about it? And the answer I got was, that's actually a larger community issue. And then a few minutes later, we looked at a series of slides that said, hey, Black students are the most likely students to be restrained and secluded, and restraint and seclusion and incarceration, the connection isn't super hard to make, right? And the other thing that I think is relevant to that is we use restraint and seclusion most frequently in elementary school when kids are smaller, right? It's a lot harder to restrain students as they are closer to our own size. I similarly feel like, Nancy, every time I've heard you talk about restraint and seclusion, I get the sense that our disproportionality is something you find incredibly disturbing, and are deeply compelled to change. So I was surprised to see that the reduction was 3%. I want to ask you to talk to me about how you got from, this is a pretty incredible issue. It's something that students interpret as trauma. It has a damaging impact on performance academically in the long term, and we want to reduce it by 3%. Talk to me a little bit about how we got there.
Sure. So looking at data trends for our school district, I will just say that I think it's because I aimed for, in all 3 of the SMART goals, this is a 1 year, so that's not our 3-year target, that's a 1-year target. But I aimed for % increase, like in inclusive opportunities, or % decrease, such as in our discipline for scholars with an IEP, and then disaggregated by race and ethnicity, a target that I believed we could achieve and potentially exceed. Because I also believe it's really important for our staff to see something on paper that they know we can get there, we can exceed that, and then we can go further the next year, and then we can go further the next year. So in developing the targets for the SMART goals, I worried about being too ambitious, because I've seen that mistake made before in this school district and other places, where then people are just like, well, this is ridiculous, this plan is ridiculous. I'm like, so I think it was a balance for me of, I most definitely don't think that's enough. I most definitely would like to see more dramatic changes within 3 months, even alone a year. But I also understand that we're turning the Titanic in a sense here. We're sort of like, in this direction, and we need to be moving in a different direction, but we have to get there.
So I understand the complexity of what we're trying to do in a variety of areas. And simultaneously, if we're not ambitious, who will be? And the other thing I want to say about that is, I think that if you talk to educators about that data, I don't think there's any group of educators who are going to show up and go, we're really excited that Black students are disproportionately being restrained and secluded in our school district. I don't think we're going to see a lot of people going, I really hope we keep that the same. I really hope that we change that minimally. And so I think if we engage our community in this conversation, if we engage our educators, there is an opportunity for us to do this collaboratively and in a way that allows for us to achieve something significant to the young people who are most impacted by this. Because I understand the challenges for adults in transitioning our behavior. I think that those challenges are not as relevant as what disproportionately restraining and secluding Black children means to Black children. And so I want to speak to that. I want to thank Board Member Vandermeulen and Board Member Castro for talking about screening for disability. I was in self-contained special education from 3rd grade, or from 2nd grade to 5th grade. And it was reading that I struggled with. And I was, told that I was behind in reading. I was told that my parents weren't reading to me enough at home. I was told by a teacher that I was dyslexic. It wasn't until I was in 4th grade that I got an eye exam. And it's really important to be able to read that you can see words, right? If you look at proportionality, Black students are less likely to have glasses in elementary school. Black students who are attacked for being loud are less likely to be diagnosed as hearing impaired. And so universal screeners are something I want to advocate for, I want us to advocate for as a district. I know that that's a resource intensive thing, and that in states that have universal screeners at the age of 4, it is often something that the state has embraced in its entirety. However, I think it's something we really need to examine in terms of whether or not we're meeting students' needs based on accurate information, and how we are getting accurate information in terms of what is keeping a student from advancing. And so I thank the other board members who spoke to screening as a way to really have this conversation and proactively meet the needs of students. I have 3 questions that come from community members. And I want to encourage folks to reach out to board members and ask us to ask your questions during the meetings, because I think that's part of our job as folks representing the public. So the first question I got from a community member is this: how much time will be committed to connecting with community stakeholders? How will they know that they have been heard in meaningful ways? That's question 1, community.
So I have not thought about it amount of time. I will say that I'm happy to go anywhere to talk about what we hope to accomplish with our SMART goals and the plan. And I'm happy to gather feedback in additional ways via writing, take it via email, via phone calls, via attending the Zooms that are set up for family members. So I think that people will know that their feedback was heard because they're going to see it show up in the plan. I mean, I have a whole set of notes from tonight that every time I do any feedback or listening sessions, we do have a form that we've used with staff to provide written feedback. So I'm happy to share that with anybody else who wants.
I would love to see it.
Thank you so much for those answers. And I'm like, I would ask you follow-up questions, but I don't know what they would want me to ask you. So I will say, this next question was posed by a community member to the entire board. Would the board consider an ad hoc or work group that is driven by special education stakeholders, a group that draws conversation to specific areas of proposed drafted content? Board members, I'm just gonna go and ask you to respond to that question from the community member.
So an ad hoc committee?
Yes, so a work group or ad hoc committee that is driven by special education stakeholder groups that draws conversations to the specific areas of the proposed drafted content. Member Vandermeulen?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Board member Gomes-Schmidt?
I think I would need to know more about the structure of what's possible and what would work, with the feedback that we're getting. So whether that's an ad hoc or a community feedback group or whatever that looks like, I would like more information going to and working collaboratively with our department to develop.
Member Gomes-Schmidt, board member Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, I think an ad hoc committee that has a defined period of time to really bring in those multiple perspectives and to help ensure that there's some language and priorities included wouldn't be a bad idea.
Thank you. Board member Simkin.
Yes.
Board member Castro.
Yeah, I think similar to board member Nichols, I think the potential ad hoc would have to be specific in charge and in a specific time window. And whatever recommendations, at least in my experience with ad hocs, would have to be approved by the board as the final step anyway. But as a form of gaining input, I could support something.
Member Pearson.
Just so I'm understanding the question, is the question, can you read it again?
I can read it.
Sorry.
Would the board consider a work group that is driven by a special education stakeholder group that draws conversation to specific areas of proposed drafted content?
So just from my understanding is like chairing the 50 ad hoc, like it has to come with actual things in which they are requesting the board to actually act upon. I think in similar vein as Savian and Nichelle, and somewhat Chris, is just, it would just depend on like how long we're doing it. Is it actionable things that we are approving? Is it the plan that we're approving? So to me, yes, but there would have to be a lot more other pieces that go for me to really say yes.
Yeah. I would say I'd be interested in exploring it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the question from the community, and I hear interest from my fellow board members, and I'm happy to follow up. And the last question I think is directed very specifically at you all. So how do you integrate special education and gen ed from a policy, budgetary, and personnel standpoint? And I'm gonna direct the question at Dr. Jenkins and ask you all to add on to his response.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. First of all, thank you for having this discussion here tonight. When I interviewed coming into the district, one of the things I think I cited, board members who were here, you remember I talked about special education, ELL, and advanced learning all having a disconnect in the infancy. And when I talk about equity, I say you have to start off with equity at the front of budgeting, not in the back. In special ed too, I added in there and I talked about our disparities because of the unintentionality that I thought was there. It came up earlier in terms of the 2016 special ed actually playing priorities. All of these things are really critical and we're getting ready. This is a perfect question because we're getting ready to go into a budget season and we must understand what are our values. And our values must be reflected as we go through this budgetary decisions that we're gonna have to make now. And at the time, when that plan was developed in 2016, and even the years before, there weren't as many staffing challenges as we have now. The results are the same. And you could even go back 10, 15, 20 years before that. The results are the same. So it's not just about staffing. I think we got into the question of culture, which Dr. Mofento was getting into, versus our strategies. And we have to think now not only about staffing, but what's the professional development and how we're shifting the culture to get to the end results that we're going to want to have. So as I look at it and I'm thinking about right now, what are our priorities? What are our areas? If you look at it cross category, right? We talk about DLI right now, right? I'm talking about the areas that we're short in hard areas. The earlier we can anticipate, which I do anticipate because it's hard across the country to fill some of these positions, put these discussions at the front of our budgetary process, the better we're going to be off with our staffing. Retention. Retention is the best thing we can do now, even more than recruitment. So this is why I am saying we're going to have to focus on staffing and upfront those hard to fill positions and also the utilization of the culture that we have. Glad you brought up Nichols, African Americans, it's all tied into the staffing and all the research says getting individuals who look like our children or making sure individuals get the right professional development so they're not anti-racist. No, they can stop being anti-Black. A lot of what's happened is because a culture sets in of anti-Blackness. You can call it whatever you want to call it. If you look at exclusion, strength, ACT, you can look at advanced learning, you can look at anything you want to look at. Until we address anti-Blackness, anti-Brown can't happen, anti-LGBTQ, IA+, it starts right there with the okayness that we can exclude a group. And you can't do that. Our disparities are pointing right there. So back to staffing, as the question, beautiful question from the individual, we got to consider all those things. So as we start making priorities about retaining our staff and recruiting our staff, that is reflective of all of those things. That's a complex question. I appreciate that question. And I would love to engage more about what I just said to everybody too. Because that's really real. And we got to deal with the anti-Blackness that I know that I experienced in '93. And I have not seen a change in it coming back today. I can't really define anti-racist as everyone talk about, but I can define anti-Black. We can.
I want to aim a question at you all because the question was specific to how do we center students with disabilities in gen ed from a policy, budget, and staffing standpoint.
So what Dr. Jenkins said, and I would say that starting with core instruction and thinking about what happens in the instruction is first and foremost, and then how we're designing that for our most historically excluded students. I think a work in progress that we have is a co-serve and a co-teach model that we still have not fully realized yet. And I think a work in progress for how Nancy and I continue to work together around the staffing pieces to maximize the staff that we do have to co-teach and to co-serve. In terms of budgetary decisions, I think it's the same thing, thinking about staffing for core first in terms of what is needed for every student. And then how do we ensure that we're also thinking about those that have been historically excluded. A policy standpoint, I mean, I constantly think about our equity tool that I don't know that we update as much anymore. I think our equity tool does an amazing job of thinking about how our policies are or not privileging certain individuals and or privileging others that may be the ones in need of that policy or service the most. So I think continuing to think about that. But I think it's a work in progress, and I think across the system, I think that some of the ways we operate are still somewhat siloed, and I think it starts with some of the work Nancy and I have started so far together over the last many months it's been. So I'll pass it on to Nancy.
Yeah, I think setting the expectation and working with our school leaders and all of our staff, regardless of whether they are hired special education staff or general education staff, that we're increasing inclusive opportunities, that they will work together in classroom spaces, that it also means extracurricular activities, that it also means summer opportunities will be inclusive, and that everyone works together on behalf of all scholars. So I think that that's the policy piece. I think that that's one of the reasons why we really want to lay out in our special education plan tier 1, 2, and 3 strategies that are used in general education across the board. And that means social and emotional learning, setting expectations for how we all interact with each other in our buildings from the youngest scholars on up, and like having it be really things that people talk about very readily rolling off the tongue, right? Like the kindness, and we listen to each other, and we are here to learn, and everybody can learn. And when it comes to academics, the same thing, that then we can, once we have those laid out really clear, we can talk to our general educators about, yep, everybody gets these. And then special education is additional services beyond the core to help scholars who need sort of a double scoop or reteaching, individualized support to make the gains that we want them to make. But just because I have special education services doesn't mean you put me out somewhere else, because I need to hear what everybody else is hearing first, or at the same time, then get the additional support that I need to learn. The universal design for learning and assistive technology, both of those strategies can be incredibly helpful to support students to be successful in the general education environment.
The last thing I would just,
go ahead.
I would just add the last thing, the investment that we just recently made, or the board actually approved, is the work of ICS Equity, and all of that is helping us get to a place that names everything we just said here in terms of how we're thinking about budget, how we're thinking about staffing, how we're thinking about policies in terms of ensuring that this is true from an equity-based standpoint and inclusive. So just wanted to add that last piece.
I greatly appreciate your responses to those questions. I want to say this, the several parts of those questions live in the domain of the board. So when we're talking about policy, we're talking about board policy. We are talking about our work. And so I want to greatly encourage the members of our board who are part of our policy committee to meet and discuss best practice and policy that has proven to have great results for kids in special education. Our neighbors in Stoughton are actually recognized for this on a national level, that they implemented a policy that made significant improvements for their kids with disabilities, and they saw that every other marginalized group of students benefited from that policy. So I think that that is our work in collaboration, but I think there is space in this conversation for the board to take greater leadership and to have this conversation in a more expansive way. The other thing I want to say is I want to thank Board Member Pearson for bringing up strength-based differentiated learning. Whether a student is identified as an advanced learner or not, all students have strengths. And as a young person, sitting through my IEP was one of the most demoralizing experiences I had year after year. It felt like listening to a group of adults tell me about all the things I wasn't good at, didn't do well, and didn't have strengths in. And there was no room for anything I was particularly good at. I don't know many adults who could withstand that level of critique, particularly when you're talking about somebody's intellect. So if we are not spending as much time recognizing our students' strengths and abilities as we are their areas of struggle, we are promoting an area in which kids lose skills instead of gain skills, because the impact that that had on me, and I've seen it have on many, many students, worked in education since I was 19 years old, is that I gave up, I disengaged because it was less humiliating than trying and failing. And I think we have to acknowledge the emotional impact we have on students in these conversations. I think you all are doing that work. I'm not saying that to say that you are not. I just want to lift the importance of it. That's it for my questions.
Yes, I just want to say your comments were powerful. Also, in this human decency, and when I say anti-Blackness, I unapologetically say that to everyone. It is the feeling of low expectations just because of the pigmentation of his skin. Anti-brown is the feeling of low expectation. A student who receives special needs services, student poverty, someone because of their gender identity, they looked upon. So when you start with the data points, I don't care how you cut it, our Black students are at the lowest level, followed by our brown students, students with special needs, students of poverty. So we can have that honest conversation. Individuals continue to act on what they know versus what they don't know. And it's a lot of strength in the particular groups that we see. We come in preconditioned and saying that this student can't read because they say orange versus orange. I said orange. For those who don't know, that's orange. Okay? So you can't judge someone because they're demographically, geographically, or whatever. As we go through this, I'm very encouraged with what we're doing with the science of reading and the investments we're making. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but we are on a path to really get ready to do something really nice in our district for all students, not just some, but all. But you have to acknowledge the piece where we're not doing well. We have to acknowledge that historically. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Vanderbilt and followed by Board Member Nichols.
One, Ali, I understand your comments and I respect the heck out of them. I stopped going to my IEPs. I couldn't emotionally handle it because it was the number of times they didn't use cognitively disabled, they used the real work back then. And I couldn't take being called the R word in a public setting. So I quit going. I think that's probably the only reason that saved my mental health and education is the fact I stopped going. As for the seclusion and restraint, the reason why I challenge the goals as much as I do and why we need to do well is this. I worked on seclusion and restraint for 17 years. I helped draft the original legislation and I keep being told we need to wait, we can only do so much. Problem is people are dying and I can't wait anymore. And that's my comments.
Board Member Nichols.
Yes, I so appreciate the comments. Thank you, Board Chair Muldrow. And I was actually going back to IEPs that I sat through with my son. And as a parent being demoralized for my son. And then also feeling like, oh, okay, I must suck. I guess I'm not doing something right because my son hasn't met any of the things that were written in the IEP. That wasn't the way that the educator was talking to us, but it was just that overall feeling, and it's year after year after year. So yes, to all the ways that it can be a really demoralizing experience and just, you know, create an environment where the parent can feel like disengaging as well as the student, which brings me to a wondering that I have around high school. And I'm wondering if maybe, and this should be something, as you all are doing more feedback, there should be a specific question around this. But I'm wondering if there should be a unique goal specifically for students who are in high school. I don't know if it would be to Board Member Castro's point earlier around social emotional, or I don't know. I think it's more, I think there's an experience at the high school level for a lot of our students that's more than them having inclusive opportunities. Oftentimes, particularly if those standardized academic assessments aren't there and they're still in, you know, and they've made it to high school, of course, I don't know. I just worry about a lot of our students at the high school level. So I don't have a better suggestion, but maybe there's a good question to ask.
Board Member Nichols, let me just tell you what we're working on right now. Because we recognize high school is serious. Learning doesn't stop because a child finishes ninth grade. Even a child with an IEP. We just met our team with Dr. Robinson, talking about dyslexia, talking about the science of reading, and we're looking to develop a program specifically for secondary. It's not just high school, it's middle and high school, upper middle school, because we do know that the dyslexia piece is real and some students go undiagnosed, period. And that leads into socio-emotional issues and acting out issues. Dr. Sean Robinson and Dr. McGregor can tell you better about it, that actually was trained by Dr. Nash Oshkosh. And he has done some remarkable work at Madison College, at UW, across the country, recognized by American University, recognized by several people. This is an African-American male within our community, and a lot of people don't even know, but he helps. When I was in Minnesota, our staff brought his name to me. He did the whole training for the district too, particularly secondary. So he deals with adults, and he can also, we're talking about him working with our parents. And so parents don't have that feeling you just talked about. And being able to help parents, you could help us help their own children know. The parent piece, thanks for bringing up, that's a big piece that we're talking about. So that's what's happening right now. We just had the meeting last week. This week.
What's the name?
Oh, today is just Monday? Okay, gee.
What's the name again?
Dr. Dyslexia, Dr. McGregor, you can speak to that. Dr. Dyslexia.
Dr. Sean Robinson, he also goes by the name of the character in his graphic novels, Dr. Dyslexia.
Okay.
Yeah, I've read them. Very familiar with the science of reading. He has a course right now that he's offering for some of our staff. We're going to put up with them to get some of the professional development. And we're very excited about this potential because we recognize learning doesn't stop at ninth grade. So for us, really at fourth grade.
Right. And to me, the key is if our students have gotten to ninth grade and have an IEP and are going through a process of not meeting, like, well, we still want to get them to the finish line and beyond.
And beyond.
And beyond. So
graduating,
you know.
That's one thing about academic and career planning.
Yeah.
We'll come back with this. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have introduced it as much, but we're so excited about it. I do want to bring this back to the board so everyone can be very informed and work with our staff about this too. But I'll think about how we get parents understand how we can help their own children.
You know, lines of Nancy's goal around literacy and reading proficiency. So I think it's perfectly aligned.
I don't know if she heard you.
Oh, I heard it.
Yeah.
You're saying it's perfectly aligned, but I'm not sure. 'Cause- Okay, I'll follow up.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll come back. with the
I'll leave it.
presentation.
It's already 8:05.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 7.1, we are hearing from the co-chairs and staff of the Jefferson Renaming Citizens Ad Hoc Committee, and now I'd like to introduce Sol Rodriguez and Letitia Nelson, who co-chaired that committee, and Dr. Hicks and Barb Osborne will be on hand as well to answer questions about process.
Thank you, Board of Education for Madison. I appreciate it. I'm Letitia Nelson, and I'm just actually Solange is on here as well. She's my co-chair, and we're going to just go through the process with you and then take any questions that you have for us. But we also want to just thank you all for the opportunity to serve, because this is a big deal for our community. The initial request to take up the renaming was received by the superintendent and the Board of Education on February 28th of 2022 at one of your regular meetings. Our committee members were chosen from recommendations made by the Board of Education members and the Jefferson school community. The committee was established by the board and began meeting in May of 2022. And then the committee held a public hearing on December 6th and had their final decision. The committee is recommending 4 naming proposals to the board that are not in order of preference, but only alphabetical order by first name: Easton Hemmings Jefferson, Ezekiel Gillespie, Maya Angelou, and Sally Hemmings. After tonight's discussion in this instruction work group meeting, we know that the Board of Education will take up the matter at the February 13th operations work group meeting. And it is then scheduled for a vote on February 27th regular meeting, your board meeting, in person at the Jefferson Middle School. This meeting will also be held virtually. All the board meetings will provide further opportunities for public input, both in person and virtually. And then an updated report of the public input from the webpage will be provided for each of these meetings as well. At this time, we'll take questions, or Soli, did I miss anything? Do you want to jump in and add anything?
No, you got it all. Actually, the only thing I would add is even before in 2022, February, Race and Equity was working on a proposal to give to the board for many years. I would say for the 5 years before that. So we had a different turnaround in principles, and finally in 2022, February, we were able to present it to the board and they took it on. So yeah, that's the only thing I would add.
Chair, I have to recuse myself due to a conflict.
Okay. Thank you all so much to our co-chairs, and thank you for sticking with us tonight. Having heard that, any questions or comments from board members? Okay. Oh, board member Muldrow.
Thank you, Chair Castro. I want to thank you all for all the work you've done to support our community in having this conversation around what it means to rename Jefferson Middle School. I did ask that in having this conversation tonight, the board was given a process to start talking about what names we prefer or how the board will go about choosing from these 4 names, because this is different than how the board has engaged in renaming in the past, in which case, for the most part, as I've experienced it, we've been given one name to vote on. So can you talk through how you want us to engage as a board with the work that you all have done in order to go from 4 names to the 1 name we're interested in renaming the school.
I think, solely, I'm gonna jump in here. I think a couple of the key things that came out in our committee meetings our work group meetings, was that some of the members, a lot of the members felt like this was an opportunity for us to teach our students a little bit more about one of the members, one of these names here. And at any rate, we should be teaching them about why a school is named and what it means to them being of color and of being of Caucasian descent. What that history does to us and how it has been maybe pushed down in a way that does not uplift us folks of color. And so that continued to come up in our committee meetings over and over again. When we brought these 4 names forth, it was because they were the ones that were, we voted a couple times within the committee, and we could not come to a consensus that one or the other of these names would have had a higher ranking for lots of reasons. And we had a couple of educators on our committee who really stressed the importance of how we educate our students and this community on why we renamed. And so we left it at the 4. That's the consensus we came to. And we would love this committee to really look at the information that is there as far as historically what's there, the comments that have been made on the website about these names and why they were chosen, but also to look at our community as Madison as a whole and why these names may or may not be important. So I think you need to look at a global view of, we think you need to look at a global view or community view of why these names were chosen and what it would mean for our city of Madison to have one or the other of the names on the school. Solely.
I would agree with wholeheartedly with everything that Tisha just said. I did want to add that working at Jefferson, I can speak to what's the consensus there at the school. They do love the 4 names and they love them in that order. I know it was said no particular order, no ranking. They love the names in that order.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's very useful information for board members in terms of what your process looked like. I think my second question is directed at my fellow board members, which is, what do you all need to be prepared to make this decision in terms of the renaming?
The background information for each of the names is very helpful. I don't know how this would work out with Robert's rules, but maybe we could do it unofficially, but maybe a process of like ranked choice voting help us come to a consensus of where the board is. The comments that our co-chairs just provided are also helpful, but I might be interested in looking at a summary of the minutes to look at how the conversations went.
So there is a tool on Zoom that we could use to do ranked choice voting via survey, but I would explore that further, and I appreciate you being that specific in how we could do this, because I think we want to engage in the process thoroughly, and also we're going to have an entire agenda to get through at that last meeting in February. So other board members, anything you need to make a decision on the renaming for Jefferson beyond kind of what Savian just named. Board member Gomez-Schmidt, and then I see board member Nichols.
I guess what I'm curious about is there another point of engagement with the larger community around, now that these 4 names have been chosen, kind of going back out and publicizing this more, that the board will be voting, but I would really like to hear from more people in the community about these 3 choices and what they think about this. So I don't think just putting it on our agenda twice is going to get that engagement. We don't have anybody speaking to us tonight as a public appearance about the 4 names. And so I'm curious, as chairs of the committee, do you have any suggestions for going back out and engaging the community in these 4 choices, or how we can gather more feedback? And thank you for your work, by the way. I really appreciate it.
I would say that all of the meetings that we had were open to the public. We did do that. And do I think that this could be a bigger, broader conversation for the community? Yes. Do I think it needs to be a thoughtful conversation? Yes. The timing that we had to try to make this choice and to, because I'm a partner within MSD, and to come in and spend the last however many months we spent on trying to make a decision about something that is so near and dear to both the students and staff at Jefferson, and not really work in their building or amongst them. But I am an African-American woman who understands what the implications of having Jefferson as a name. And I have read a lot of the comments that have come from the community that to me need a little bit more light shed on them, why people said what they said and how they feel. I don't know how you would go about doing that forum, but I will tell you Goodman is open if y'all need to have a space. So, because I do think that conversation is the only way we're going to get to a place where we are really honoring what it means to have somebody's name on our baby's school. We can't just put any old name on our baby's school and then just let them come and not even understand why it's there, who decided that, and why they didn't have a voice in it. So we have to be the voice for them. So whatever way we can do that, let's do that. I'm all for it. And I do believe that we need to be super thoughtful and intentional about what that name is. So, and I will just make another comment about the ranked choice voting. We did we did that in one of our meetings, and I will tell you it threw a lot of people off, because what happens with the ranking is that depending on how you rank it, it gives you a percentage of who voted in their first round, their second round, their third round, and that kind of skews the numbers a little bit. And so that's just some added note and something that we came upon when we were doing this process ourselves. So
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
I would like to add something, please. That for a year now, we've been placing this in our bulletin, in our family bulletin. We have been, it's on our website. It was on the news. Every meeting has been open to the public. Every time I get a chance to speak to the Hispanic community, the African-American community, the Afro-Latino community, we do it as well. But they are, if you notice the comments, it comes mostly from citizens that are not from those communities, and negative comments that are inequitable, because my community does not have, a lot of them don't have the resources that maybe that family has to get on a computer and get on there and speak and write down things that they don't even have the resources to do it in their language. So, I know where they're coming from, and I know what they want. The majority of them, I can't speak to each and every one of them, but the ones that have spoken to me, I know for sure that they do want to change. And they want to change now. You'll see a lot of negative comments from people that this doesn't affect. The name doesn't affect them. But our kids, a name affects them.
So Board Member Nichols.
Oh, yes, I was just gonna say, first of all, thank you to the committee for.
Hold on, first wasn't done.
Well, my apologies. I didn't realize.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for the feedback on that, but I think it sort of kicks us back to us as a board to say what feedback do we still feel like we need to gather on this, right? And is there something else that we as a board need to do to make sure that we're hearing the voices of the committee in this decision? Because I think Board President Moltor, just like you said, this is different than the other ones that have come to us that have been one name. And I want to make sure that the community, our larger Madison community, understands that we are making this decision based on the fact that we have 4 choices here. So I'm not sure that, and based on it, I'm not saying that it has been anything about the way you have done this, because I think having the public meetings and the process you have engaged in has been very, very open and transparent. I just don't know that people have been paying attention to the fact that they know that we have these 4 choices and that we're going to be making this decision based on, you know, the 4 that you have recommended. So that was just my suggestion, is that we as a board need to figure out what else we need to do if, and not expecting you all to solve that, just what we need to do in our own process next.
So I do want to just chime in, speaking to that in terms of the board's process, that similar to other times when we have transitioned a name, we will have the meeting where we do that at Jefferson. So our February regular board meeting will be at Jefferson so that folks in the Jefferson community can come talk to us about their preference. We have no say in who shows up, but I do think the fact that there are 4 names means people might want to weigh in a little bit more than in the past where we've had 1. That being said, I think there's space for us to be influenced in public comment, and we do want to hear from the Jefferson community at that meeting and before that meeting. Board Member Nichols, what do you need for us to make a decision?
Well, based on your last comment, I mean, I guess what I was looking at was the timeline that says this conversation is coming back to us in the operations work group on February 13th. So like Board Member Castro, I was wondering if we could use the 13th to try to get, I don't know, some idea of like our top 2, or, you know what I mean? But I don't know if that curtails the public discussion comment then on the 27th. I certainly am going to be committed to going through all of the background information and that's been provided by the committee. I just want to thank you so much for all of the research and resources that you've provided to us. And, you know, I feel like we each need to be committed to going through the website and all of the, you know, the notes to the best of our ability. But I don't know, it feels like it would be more productive on our end to come into the 27th with a couple of names, but that we're choosing from instead of the whole group of 4, but I don't know how others feel.
Board members who haven't chimed in, is there anything you want to ask for or need specifically in order to make this decision in the end of February, or anything you'd like for our folks to prepare going into the operating meeting?
I guess what would be would we follow our typical rules if we don't come to a consensus? Names. Like, what would be the request?
I mean, I think in the short term, it would be that the name stays Jefferson Middle School. So if the board doesn't have 4 votes for a name change, then you can't change the name. I will say, I'm a huge supporter of changing the name.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it at that. I'm just saying personally, I would like the name changed. Like I'm not saying I don't support that. I mean, I personally also would like to move away from naming schools after people. So that's, I think I've said that multiple times. So just what would be the request then? We don't name it after any of these names. Not to say, you know, not to honor the work. I'm not saying like, let's not honor the work that has already been put in, like been done. But if we don't come to consensus, is there a way to then go a different direction? I'm not exactly sure what that answer would be, but that's just my thoughts now.
I think the complexity of saying, like, if the board took a stance on whether or not we name schools after people, then we would have to change our policy on renaming to reflect that. And so I think, given the parameters folks have already worked in, that if we were not able to come to a consensus or a majority vote, it would stay as Jefferson.
Got it, thanks.
Anybody else who hasn't chimed in have anything specific around this? So then I guess the last thing I would say is I want to thank Dr. Hicks for joining us. And Dr. Hicks, if you have any guidance for us or anything that you think might help us in this process, we'd love to hear from you this evening.
I just believe that in making a decision, as previously stated, thank you, Board Chair Mojo, for inviting me into the space to just make sure look at all of the four names and all of the resources that are provided in research for that. That is there, and then continue to get any feedback within the interim time from school community, the community at large, around their understanding of the names, and then going from there, because it has taken a very long time. A lot of work was put in by the committee members, and I'm newer to this process, just like they were. And so my input was very minimal, just making sure that the process was going along it should have. So I would say that, and also go back and reflect and look at some of the comments and the questioning that was done within the process by the committee members. And that might help you to understand where they were also coming from in their synopsis of where we came to, where they came to on those four names.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hicks, Board Member Castro. That's it for my questions.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you all so much again for sticking with us tonight. I know it was a late night, and thank you again for your service on this committee and providing us with some good names for us to consider. And with that, may I please get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.